Welcome, everybody, for today's Rising Tide Foundation lecture, following up on the theme from last week, delivered by Madison Holmes on the nature of the occult agencies influencing a lot of the things we've taken for granted or are falsely treated as a political or purely economic or purely cultural question over the past millennia. It really helps to tie things together. And I think I was really happy that Nick has been doing work directly on this theme, on this topic now for quite a number of years, really. And when he pitched a few months back this topic for a class and an associated series of essays that are coming out soon, probably will become a book as well. I was really happy. And Nick is somebody who, as a professional dancer, has really immersed himself in every single day of his childhood and adult life in the study of the arts, as well as in the practice of the arts, which obviously you can't separate those two things, and with a deep sensitivity to the political dynamics shaping our history and oligarchical systems. He's more than qualified than anybody that I know to tackle what we're about to see today in the form of a presentation called From Louis XIV to the Ballet Russe, How the World Renaissance Was Hijacked by Apollo. Provocative, lovely title. I'm curious to see what you do with this, Nick. By the way, Nick is the president of the Artists Alliance for Africa. That's something that people could help out with, explore it, share the word and the ideas that are really being stimulated by Nick, his partner Julia, and their network. That's going to be in the description box under this video when it goes up online. And like usual, when Nick is finished, we're going to open up for dialogue. So just put your name or your digital hand up, and I'll call upon you accordingly. So Nick, thank you. It is all yours.
Thank you, Matt, for the great introduction. I'm just going to sort out my screen here and we'll get going.
Nick, are you speaking right now?
Yeah, does everyone hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Let's do a couple of checks. No?
Yes, you can be heard now.
Jenny, you hear me? We good? Jenny's my test. All right. Where are we? I'm just moving Yoel around the screen. I think I'm going to turn everybody into... It's just Matt. I'm just looking at Matt now. You're all Matt. Okay. Let's begin. Today, just to kind of recap all of that, like in my career, like it was a hard one, I must say, like living in this time, kind of growing up in this age, like extremely confusing for a young guy. Like I came into ballet not really wanting to do it. It's really hard. I was more of a sportsman as a kid. But my older brother had already gone to the Royal Ballet School by scholarship and had gotten into the school by chance, really. He had only been doing ballet 6 months. So it's really an intervention on the part of our family. We were a working class family living in Essex in England. And through that scholarship, he got out and I followed him because we all had the body and the aesthetics for ballet by you know, the good grace. And so it became our kind of path and passion, like not by choice. It was definitely, you know, by divine grace, like not that I knew it at 11 years old. It was my parents that definitely did know, like you know, with the money trouble we had, they were like, okay, you've been given this scholarship to go to one of the most expensive schools in England. And it's going to be really great for your education and you're going to come out as a classical artist. And I was like, whatever. And they were like, no, this is really good for you. But in the education, I got to be honest, it more led and lent towards the barbaric side of the arts. And we're going to go over that because basically they're one of the same. The Romantics and the Barbarians, they end in the same extreme, essentially. They will both sacrifice the individual before they change or feel the need to intervene and develop a creative process that will save the individual. So I was under sometimes a bit of a barbaric training system, better than other systems. Like, I'm not going to complain too much. Like, I had a good education, but it was a little bit traumatic sometimes. And I struggled for the first 4 years to really understand why I was doing it at all. And then at like 14, 15, I had a bit of an intervention. I was walking through the garden one day and I had a idea about ballet. And that's also when I started, already before I'd had an idea to start, like I wanted to take this, what I was starting to see as like a form of beauty, and I wanted to develop it in a real way. And that's when I had my idea as a small, naive child to start an academy of arts in Africa somewhere, because my parents had lived there when I was a kid. So I had this kind of crossover thing. And it's because of the struggle, honestly, with my education that I got to where I am today. Like I didn't even know Schiller until I was like 20, 21 years old when I went to the Stuttgart Ballet in Germany to become a professional. So I started being a professional already 19 years old, and I was in Stuttgart Ballet for 5 years from 19 until 24, 25. And it was there that I met the Schiller Institute, and that really did open up everything for me. Then all of a sudden, because I was a bit of a prodigal son when it comes to ballet, I really didn't listen to what I was told, and I was a bit, well, I just didn't like the over excessive form and the way it tried to strangle me, because I do have a strong individual soul, and it seeks reason, and there were a lot of unreasonable aspects to my education. So I was really like challenged by that. And of course, there was a renegade at first. There's a revolutionary, there's a little bit Jacobin in me. And I started to fall into eco warrior circles because of the frustration of my industry. But then Schiller Institute saved me again. So then I had another intervention where God was like, no, 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 you ain't going there. And brought me back in line and was like, here's Friedrich Schiller. Like, you need to know this guy. Like your cause is real, but the effects are not very good. And I was like, sure. So I need to study this, this, and this, and this. And I met this wonderful person called Jonathan Thrun, who though was a challenge too by character, he opened my soul and brain up to enormous amounts of information that had I not learned, I don't think I would have been able to do this academy in Africa, because it's going to be extraordinarily difficult. And without this education, impossible. I would have gotten it all wrong. And so here we are. We're about to take on this class, which basically is going to kind of like take that individual experience and broaden it on a world scale, and how this happens to many, many people like me who get disenfranchised at a very young age with art, because art is extremely difficult. Okay, like the trouble with it is like it takes tens of thousands of hours to master any single one of these forms, and you really do have to lay it on the line every day. You got to get up, and regardless of how you feel, you have to administer a certain character that seeks the higher self and the higher truth and the higher potential in you. And it's really hard emotionally to believe that you're worth it. Like it's hard. It's like, you know, there's days where you're just like, whatever, let's not bother. But the actual form itself somehow keeps you in love and keeps you going, and is even allowing you to negotiate with your body. So that this is something that I will develop in the future with my thinking on teaching and how I've learned from the past masters, how they were teaching. And this class has also opened a lot of that up. So let's get started, because I wanna go today. 2:15. Let's begin. So the cult of Apollo, from Louis XIV to Balanchine. I don't know if anybody's heard that name, but you are going to know it soon. He's a modern George Balanchine. So observation of Louis XIV's intention with art. We'll get the bad out of the way. It's mostly egocentric, as we can see from this painting here. He is adorned in all of this gold, and he is put in a position where everybody is surrounding him. He is the center of attention. It's not the painting doesn't actually really say anything other than look at me, my opulence, my vanity, my beauty. There's not much else in the painting. Everybody's facing forward en face, very direct. There's no interrelation amongst them. It doesn't even seem like there's a conversation. It's a stop and stand pose. Okay, a lot of royal families did this. It was to platform their power. So egocentric paintings, choreographies, court formations all placed the king at the center of daily life, and even ballet was used in this way too. But there are kind of good effects of this. So like the trouble in France at the time was the nobility was clearly corrupt, a lot of it, and they sought to remove Louis XIV because he came in as a child king. So ballet and fencing, the nobility were preoccupied with these new formalities that they created, and they sought to also increase the education of the nobility and lift them up, so that there wasn't so much infighting going on. So court life was revolved around ballet, fencing, social events. But bear in mind, the kind of catch-22 is that everything's done with Louis at the center, and everyone is there to seek his approval, and it creates a kind of tyrannical rule, you know, like that thing of he's like this sun god that everybody has to bow to, and we're losing the rationale that actually built the economic power of France. So there was no time for the nobility. The good thing was there wasn't much time for the nobility to start going around and you know, gossiping and creating all of their mechanisms to get Louis off the throne or whatever, and instead they were preoccupied with court life. But more importantly, the nobility really did want to get rid of Mazarin, who was his first finance minister or kind of controller, like because Louis was too young to run the country. So at first, his mum made sure after his dad died, after Louis XIII died, that Mazarin stayed as in a principal role of continuing to develop those economic policies that had brought about this golden era of France. And Colbert, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, was Mazarin's apprentice assistant at the time, and he would take on that position later. So we had a really long stretch of the continuing like the economy was just getting bigger, and the people were realizing greater and greater standards of living, and that brought about an extravagance, not in a sense of like a vain way, but there was a massive amount of access all of a sudden. So, for example, during this time, there were over 200 ballet schools or dance schools around 1650 already in France. So 200, over 200 dance schools, and teaching all different classes. So it like even though in the court it had this thing of opulence and vanity, in the common, in the public, those schools went on to teach normal people like me a beautiful art form that lifted our soul to a higher principle of thinking, right? More in connection with our creator. But Louis, he wants to focus on his athleticism and statuesque ballet poses. So these sought to enshrine his dominance. And so hence we have the sun god based on the image of Apollo. It's the image that he takes on. This aim is to appear as an absolute power, a sort of demigod, and this would be to to embody the power of the state and spirit into one man. So anti-Platonic, like going away more to like a fanatical kind of fascist regime. And actually, it will be mentioned soon that it leads up to the next majorly full frontal fascist takeover of France. So the beauty that was created, if there was any beauty at all, like the Palace of Versailles, is one of vanity and opulence. There isn't much reason to the beauty, and it's often over exuberant. Too much curvature, too much opulence, too much gold, too much glitter. Okay. And we have this in certain churches as well. I've seen it in Spain and places where the opulence will surely make Jesus Christ sick, right? So that's the thing. Like we've all read some of the stories, and we know that that is not a good thing to shower oneself in these material things unless it's for the sake of beauty. Now, of course, we will understand that gold, silver, these things are beautiful, but if you completely cover a wall in those things, it loses its value, right? So once Colbert and Mazarin had died, Louis, of course, because of his ideology, didn't really know what to do without them, and kind of went into his ideology, which has already been prepared as a child. Now, there does seem to be a period that I've got to investigate a bit more, where Louis, after a rebellion called La Fronde, one of the early rebellions in his reign that was basically supported by the nobility and the Spanish Habsburgs, that were trying to get rid of basically trying to get rid of the policies that Colbert and Mazarin had initiated in France, more than anything. Not get rid of Louis XIV, but get rid of the people and the mentors, the Platonic mentors around him. So once they were gone and out of the way, they died naturally. But once they were gone, Louis, being a child king, was younger than them, and he continued to rule. And that's where things started to really fall apart very quickly, because with that ideology, he started a lot of wars and basically tried to expand the territory of France. And that worked, but it created a reaction in Europe too, which was something called the Grande Alliance, which then a formation of European countries pushed back against France. So that wasn't a good thing. But essentially, the common people, the population, began to suffer these economic effects, while the sun god was spending the state wealth on vanity projects like the Palace of Versailles to kind of create a statue of his wealth for history, right? But it's not really based on the Renaissance tradition. So that symbol of opulence later became a very essential image in the French Revolution. And yeah, we'll get onto that later. At the height of France's power, Louis XIV succeeded in plunging France into a period of social upheaval and set the stage for the next demigod, Napoleon Bonaparte. So that's who I was talking about before, in the next fascist regime, or the oncoming of some 100 years later. So the people's confusion brought on during the Enlightenment period that stretched between the time after Louis's death and the arrival of Napoleon. This is a time where laissez-faire romantic attitude towards art and culture and life itself became more commonplace and prepared the way for the barbarity we saw in art that comes around throughout the 20th century until today. Go to the next slide. Yeah, that's good. So here is I like to do as always. Sorry, someone's trying to join. Do I need to respond to anything there? No. So on the right, we have a painting of Louis XIV, Louis XIV, as a young child in the image of Jupiter, who is that's another name for Apollo. This image does catch me off guard a little bit because he is standing on what appears to be Medusa. And in the back, well, he's holding, of course, the Promethean fire. And in the back, we have the men working in the forge. Don't know. There's a lot to be opened up with Louis XIV. Also, it is 400 years ago. So this was one of the hardest periods to actually study. The 20th century is easier to find information on. But these paintings, we have to really look at them a long time to really find sometimes it's obvious. Like obviously this painting on the left here is a painting of Jupiter / Apollo coming as a sort of god of, well, in this, because the red cloud behind him, I'm going to show you another picture. Well, you see the red curtain there. It symbolizes war, Mars, god of war. That's a Roman god. So red generally is the color of passion, war, envy, and blood, hatred. Also, just as a side point, fast food restaurants always using red to get you to be hungry. It's a color that initiates a certain emotion in us and a certain kind of tenaciousness. And so the cloud of red symbolizes I'm coming with that. And we're gonna it masquerades as a time of light, and instead it brings in a time of chaos, famine, war, confusion, instability, right? So it's like a false Prometheus. It's a anti-Christ as such. So there's the four horses referenced often in all forms of mythology, especially Western. And on the bottom here is Aurora. So let's talk about some of the good people under Louis, because that's the thing. It was the form was just fantastic. Can't squander the form. So the sense, of course, we've just seen that individually he was way off the center, like way off the universal principles. But at least his mentors who had already, that's the thing, they're relics of a past monarchy that was much better. So his reign is the longest reign of Europe, and it's because of the past, not because of him necessarily. It's because of these past people that are basically helping. Like they create the whole nation state for him to rule that long, and then he squanders it on wars. So in this painting, in the black here, we have Jean-Baptiste Colbert. That is the man himself. In the seat on the right there, slightly faded out, is Louis XIV. And just on the left of Colbert there is a man named Charles Perrault, and he wrote the original Sleeping Beauty, Au bel bois dormant. And yeah, he's an extraordinary man. Like we're going to talk a little bit about him. So this, for me, this period actually of Louis XIV resembles a sort of finality to the Golden Era, like at least like it's like the height of France for me. So like it's what I consider like the pride before the fall, especially in Louis. Everybody else is still lifting the nation, but as soon as Colbert and Mazarin die, for example, we have a very quick fall into the wars and the famines. But in his early reign, his mother, who was the queen regent, she actually annulled a council that was set up by his deceased father, Louis XIII. And his mother, Anne of Austria, alongside Mazarin and Colbert, continued the successful economic policies already in place. So she didn't want like to have a council like over her son, kind of whispering in his ear, and because he's young and impressionable. And the thing is, there is this period where as a young kid, hang on, wait, I'm going to say it. This, so yeah, they continued those successful economic policies, but this unsettled the nobility because they got their plans to take back France from these Republican mentors into an oligarchic faction, right? So that's what their aim is. And so it unsettled them and their oligarchic ambitions. So they started and financed a series of rebellions, the first being called La Fronde, which means the sling, which is the literal weapon they used to get at the army. And it was orchestrated and financed largely by the Spanish Habsburgs. And it was to try and remove Louis, but more importantly, his Platonic mentors, Colbert and Mazarin. And interestingly, it all began 1 year or like a year and a half after they signed the Peace of Westphalia. So it's like we have a peace amongst the faiths as well, because already you have the so-called Reformation, which wasn't at all, it was an attempt to destroy Christianity. So you already have the split, but now the split of the Christian faith, and now it's really splitting as well. Like you've got even Jansenism in France, which is kind of like a Catholic sect, and like you've got all of these sects that are kind of coming because this is the divide and conquer thing. So they're all, trying to own the word, and it's creating a lot of religious bigotry. Like it's really bad. A lot of people were killed simply because of their religious beliefs, which is, we've seen this many times in history, and it always represents the worst in us, like the fears in us that are really like irrational. So they instigated all of that to basically destroy this peace, this extraordinary peace of Westphalia, which is the basis for international relations in the world today, or should be. Mazarin died in 1661. Louis was only 22 at the time. And so, thank the Lord, we had Jean-Baptiste Colbert step into the role, who retained the policies of Mazarin and even increased the energy for the nation building project by forming academies of education. So Colbert's like, I'm not enough. We need more people that know what I know. So I'm going to build all these academies, and we're going to have an enormous percentage of the children that are being born today out of the economic wealth. We're going to take 10% or whatever, if you think like that, like we're going to take 10% of that population and lift it to the very highest understanding of Platonic principles and Christian principles. So those academies were Académie des Inscriptions et des Lettres, Académie des Sciences, of which Huygens, Christian Huygens from Holland, was the director of. So a big name, someone I need to study a lot more. There's the Académie Royale d'Architecture aussi, Académie de France, which was set up in Rome. There's already one Académie Française in Paris, but they set up another one in Rome. This one's very interesting, and it reminds me of Leibniz in his love for Oriental art and culture. École des Jeunes de Langue. So that was the study of Oriental languages, like Mandarin. And then there was the Observatoire de Paris as well. Now, Louis XIV also set up the Académie de la Danse, or the Conservatoire de la Danse, which was run by people like Pierre Beauchamp, who was his dance teacher. We're going to go more into that, but it's not Louis XIV himself that develops the form, just to make that clear right now. He really is just a man on a seat. It's all of the great thinkers underneath him that, because of his wealth and his capital, like his image, they can get a lot done because of that power, and they do. They use it very, very well. A quote from him, just to make it clear how he feels or thinks: the nation does not form a body in France. It resides entirely in the person of the king, basically in me. So that sums him up. He's not thinking the same way as Mazarin and Colbert. And it's a really strange irony. Something I really want to get a lot more into is like, how are these people operating alongside one another when they are so different mentally? Like it's kind of, Colbert must have just been very, very smart in how he is managing his relationship with the king, because it's quite a long time. Like, it's a good 20-25 years that they're working together. And not to mention, Louis XIV trusts Colbert absolutely. So it's like, okay, you have this guy who you love and obviously honor so much, but then you yourself have no wish to be like him. I don't know. There's something about it that just doesn't. He must be so arrogant. Or there is this period where, as a kid, when I wanted to go back to La Fronde, when it first happened, they had to get him out of the country because, of course, they're like, oh no, like it's all popping off. Like, maybe we should get you out. Which often in history, like when I've seen that that's happened, where there's this kind of like, we're gonna just take him out for a second. When they come back, they're all messed up, and something happens there. There's an initiation that when he's first there, of course, he's under his mother's love. And they did this in Sparta too, where they take boys away from their mum so that they could indoctrinate them the way they wanted. And so if you want to read, but that's why, yeah, that's why we have nursery rhymes and all of that. Like, it's so important to get them young. So like the thing is, that's what happens. He does get taken out of France for a good 4-year, 5-year period. And it seems that in that period, by the time he comes back, he has this image of himself that he is the absolute rightful ruler of France, and he's been sent by God as a kind of in the figure of Apollo, which is a satanic image. So I don't know how you could be sent by God on that. But yeah, sent by God as absolute ruler. And it's all because people have whispered in his ear, basically, like, everybody in France hates you. And the reason everybody's rebelled against you is because they want to kill you, which creates a kind of like hatred for his own country in him. And I think that's where, so you've got the empire or the oligarchs, they've created this rebellion. And now they're telling him that the rebellion that we created has happened because all the people in France hate you, which in reality, this rebellion is a tiny minority of the people. Because we've just also had the policies of Colbert and Mazarin. So again, that does not make sense. So
Nick,
obviously,
Nick, how old was he when he was removed from France and
he's
brainwashed, I guess?
like 11.
Oh, that young. Okay.
Yeah, like really, really before teenage. It's like literally as he's coming into his adolescence, which is that's the time.
Mm.
Um, because the brain is doing this all the time to try and, because you've gone from this hypnotized state of yourself, which is a child just receiving things freely without any kind of um perception of it. Like, so that's where we're innocent. Like, all things are innocent in children because they don't know what is good or bad. But then in adolescence, they start to, that's the whole thing of going through puberty. You grow up and you start to see thyself and the image of thyself, and you start to reference thyself with the world. And that perspective gives you the shading. And you're like, okay, so like based off of also like the first 10 years of experience, I now know what is good or bad. And I have lived to tell the tale. And this is where they can start to now shift things into order in a way which, especially if you have these kind of experiences where, like, a rebellion is forcing you to run away, which for a young boy would have been extremely scary, bear in mind. Like, I know he's king and he has all this opulence around him, but it's still scary when, like, people are telling you, like, everybody in our country wants you dead. Like, it's really scary. And you don't have the science and technology that we have today, okay? Things are pretty open still, even if you're rich. I mean, they didn't even build a wall around the Palace of Versailles with its original construction. That's how expensive walls were. So, like, yeah, it's not just like we can't take any of these things for granted. So in Louis's mind, the ballets are meant to immortalize his image as an absolute ruler, sent by God to unite France. This is what he did, this thing called Danse de la Nuit. It was supposed to resemble this metaphorically. So the idea is that throughout, it was 12 hours, right? It's a 12-hour ballet. Can you imagine? Like, everybody must have been like so that they didn't piss him off, like just like holding their eyes open, like, like imagine. And it's overnight, right? They're starting at like 10 o'clock in the evening and going till 6 o'clock in the morning because he's got to come on stage when the sun rises. So it's all very pagan. It's all done in the darkness as well. And the dance was basically like 42 sections, and most of it is like pagan rituals all around demons, dervishes, mystical things that, for the sake of storytelling, aren't altogether always bad. Like, we will talk about this in romantic times later on, because there's a bit of a nuance there that we have to understand. Fantasy is, of course, effective when we're trying to describe events in the real world. So, but it's how it's done. And so in this sense, it's all done with this idea of that eventually this guy is going to come and wipe away all of the darkness and restore order. And it's a bit complex as to why that's needed, because there already appears to be quite a lot of order and beauty in France. So I don't know, it's just standing on top of something that's already been created by others. So he used art in an Aristotelian way, like in a tyrannical way, always, and it was out of fear of being overthrown by his subjects. Originally, that's how it starts. I suggest it would be that the fears in him actually then grab him and turn him against his own people, and that's why he's convinced to use this image as an image of power, so that he doesn't get replaced. The economic policies that had put the Commonwealth of its people first now made way once Colbert was dead. Colbert died in 1683. So we had another 20 years or so without him, and it really did fall apart very quickly. And it's this opulence and decadence, that like cultural decadence, that led the way to the French Revolution and the next Sun King, the self-appointed demigod, Napoleon Bonaparte. They are one of the same. I'm going to read here a little excerpt before I forget from the good old EIR. So Augustus and Tiberius have had many imitators in modern times. These have included the paganist, self-styled Sun King of France, Louis XIV, and that parody of Louis XIV known as the first fascist regimes, those of the Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte and his successor Napoleon III. The continuation of that modern fascist revival of ancient imperial Rome has included the followers of Immanuel Kant and the first modern philosopher of the fascist state, G.W.F. Hegel. So I just wanted to add that in there for a little bit of added structure. Let's go to the next slide. Some images again. So here we have it on the left and on the right. Those are paintings of Louis XIV in his overly extravagant costumes, which are very hard to move in. So it's very, again, ironical how we've gone from ballet in Italy, which is dressed in light clothing that increased one's mobility, to this man like completely showered in gold and jewels and like these costumes. I've looked at some of these costumes because my school had some costumes in our museum from like 1700 and stuff, and I got to feel how heavy some of the, like, because the costume normally come, like even a tunic like that will come in 3 sets. So the skirt would be separate, the tunic would be separate, and the shoulders would be separate, and you would put it all on like an armor, right? Because that's what it was like. Like it was like a militaristic kind of thing. Like it's very like that. Like here I am, badges and all. So already as a kid, like looking at that, I was like, oh, eye roll. Like here we go, like another. And it was just that thing of like, now also a lot of these images I saw as a kid already, then if we look at, we can see the stage looking at the audience, and already the theme gets put at the front, and everything is facing towards him, rather than before in Catherine de Medici's time, the stage was centered and everybody was sat around. Okay, the audience now feels like a part of the scene, okay, because it's the scene ends up being like a lake in the middle of them, whereas when it's with the stage at the front and the audience, everybody facing the stage, it's more two-dimensional, and it creates this image of the stage as though nothing can change, or like a static kind of frame. Whereas the original thing, if we look at like the Italian style, or like what was brought in as Ballet Comique de la Reine under Catherine de Medici, which was the original formation of ballet in France, the stage setting was, there were no wings, or like there was no walls, it was open. So that led the audience to this essence of that anybody could come in at any moment and intervene into the scene, and suddenly events would change, and that was interesting, and that was live. That is real life. And humans can't be ordered in that way. They will always randomly seek the good. It's just something about them. Like even when they're walking in a forest, they don't even really know they are seeking the good until they find it, and then they do, and that's the innocence concept. So on the right, remember I showed you that image before of the left here of Apollo with the red plume, this is symbolic. So that red plume, a cloud of war. There you go. It's there on the headdress. It's a cloud of war, hatred, red, fire, passion. And at the bottom here, it says La Guerre. So that was Louis XIV literally representing, like, you know, when we talk about the four horses, like war, famine, poverty. There you go. This is him representing those four symbols of this time that's about to come. So we've gone from Golden Renaissance to now. I'm gonna destroy all of this. Gonna hijack it. Now I'm gonna take us back because like that was the first hijacking. So on the left here, we have Mr. Balthasar de Beaujoyeux. And he was French, like Italian ballet master who Catherine de Medici had hired because she was like, he's the most brilliant person I can find. She brought him to Paris and encouraged him to perform some of his ballets that he had already started developing, like story ballets. And as you can see, that's what I meant about the proscenium, about the stage. It was placed in the center of the court. So actually, what's amazing, look, you can see her sat back here. The king and the queen are behind the performers. How amazing is that? Like, they actually love art. Like, they really love art, like in a true way. They're real philosophers. You know, they're sitting behind it. Like, they're not putting themselves front and center. They're putting the thing, the beauty, front and center in front of them to make it crystal clear to everybody in the room. Don't look at me, look at him. Learn something today, okay? She genuinely wanted this nation to become greater. And remember, her story is one of like, she not is strictly not nobility. She's from a common family. So yeah, rags to riches. Like the Medici's a extraordinary story in general. But she financed it. Like she brought it in, got it going, formate, like, you know, didn't do it herself, but got all the people, organized them, gave them the money, gave them the mandate and said, please go ahead. This is your nation to do this in because we're the most organized and we can actually platform this so that other people around Europe and this can spread and become a real fountain of beauty. On the right is a picture. The postal stamp on the left is a Russian postal stamp of Mercury. And in the period that we're just about to go to, there was a dancer called Carlo Blasis, who was an Italian dancer, and he developed the form, like he continued to develop the form. He was taught by Jean-Georges Noverre, who was the great French academician for ballet. He basically took everything that had been done under Louis XIV and reformed it, developed more steps out of it, more spirals, more épaulement, which means shouldering, which means this. So if I turn my shoulders and I keep my face facing front, it creates a beautiful line where we have torsion in something like, so like the spine is straight, but as soon as you turn it, you make the body 3D. Now I have shades, light is here and shade is here. At the same time, it gives contour to the face. So if I turn more, I have now opposition where my face is turning like facing the opposite way from my chest. And all of these angles, they create, like in ballet, we play a lot with croisé, which is like shaded, where the arm is like crossed over my face, or effacé, which is open, where the arm is behind, still framing, still curvature, still creating the frame, the beautiful form for the expression to exist in. But yeah, just different shade. So this one normally is positive, whereas this one is more sad, negative, like shaded. This attitude, position that the man is showing quite nicely on the right, comes from the Athenian image of Mercury. It was something that was developed from Carlos Blasis, and hey, like not always are the things developed out of the most beautiful thing. Like some beauty is developed out of pagan concepts because well, that's the potential of the human mind. Like it can take anything and turn it into a beautiful thing. So don't get stuck with that. Like if we ever see something pagan, we're like, oh, no, don't do that because a lot of what is in folklore has been used in classical art. And for me, that is the way of taking real innocence, real playfulness, which is often chaotic and a little can often hurt. Like I'm in the throes of a baby boy, like the amount of mistakes I've seen him make comes from moments of chaos where he just wants to go and then he realizes I shouldn't have gone. And that relationship, when you run into something or that you didn't see, teaches us to humble ourselves. And so you already have that in the physical, but in ballet, we can take anything, or in art, you can take anything which is pagan or childish, raw, give it form, and then upon giving it form and essence, or like lifting the essence, because it already has essence. Most pagan things have a lot of essence, too much essence. But if you give it form and you give it aesthetics, you lift the nature of that material thing, and suddenly it becomes immaterial. And now we have an idea. I wanted to show everybody this too. It's really just a quick little thing to show you. This is the beginning of the notation of what we call Baroque dance. Baroque dance is the beginning of ballet, and this was the core form for it. Okay. Matt, you said something about the music, about the sound that I have to do.
Yes, when you do so I would do a stop share.
Yeah.
And then return to the share screen. And when the first window pops up on the bottom left-hand side of that window that pops up, you'll see a share sound. So you have to click on share sound.
Okay.
I didn't know that you could embed a YouTube video into a PowerPoint. Fascinating.
It's cool.
Yeah.
So then when I go back on the Zoom, I would press share sound.
Yeah, exactly. So it might be on the bottom left, or it might be on the bottom on the right hand side. It'll say options share
Layouts.
sound.
Layouts and options.
Yes. Layouts options.
Ah, yes, got it. Okay,
Yes.
brilliant. Share sound. Great. So I want to go back to that page. So they're gonna, it's just for fun. We're just gonna watch it. They're dancing. Can everybody see it well enough?
Yeah, it's
Do I
it's
have
okay.
yeah. And Matt, if I play now, do you hear the sound?
Yes.
But on the left is the literal notation that they are dancing with the formation, spacing, you see the spirals. And if you look at some of the steps, there's curvature in the leg, there's a epaulement here, spiral movement, back to back, opposition. Wunderbar. So that was the form. So yes, that was the form. And that is not ballet. That is just the formation of. So that would be like what a dance class was like to practice the technique so that you could perform narratives. There does have to be, of course, practicing of the form a lot of before you get to be able to add essence. Because once you add storytelling, you're not thinking of the steps anymore. You're thinking of the story, and you have to have mastered the steps so well to be able to just think of the story while you're dancing. So I just wanted to mention here as well, the reason, like with Louis XIV, some of the wars that, of course, we had the religious bigotry that he revoked in 1685. He revoked something called the Edict of Nantes, which was a religious text that basically allowed for religious freedom within France, but he revoked that. And then there were a bunch of wars. There was the Spanish-Dutch War that was fought with the Spanish for the control over Holland, called the War of Devolution in 1667. Then there was the Dutch War, 1672 to 78. And then there was the War of the Reunion, 1683 to 84. These wars, like I said before, resulted in France expanding its space. And that created a kind of reaction in Europe where Louis XIV is using his power to expropriate and take over land, which of course is going to set everybody's spines, set their hairs up. And so there's a Grand Alliance to restrain these French ambitions, and that began the 9 Years' War. So we had the Peace of Westphalia in the middle of the century, and very quickly, of course, we had a good amount, like a good 3 decades of peace and harmony where, okay, the economy really did go to another place, I'm not saying that it was all lost. Like France kept its prestigiousness and its prestige and its height in economics, but it wasn't the same as when Colbert was there. You had the War of Spanish Succession in 1701 to 14 as well. So lives were lost, disease was rampant, famine was rising, the economy was in shambles, and high taxes by the end of Louis XIV's reign. So what started out as a golden age very much ended in the chaos that Lucifer promised. And you shouldn't go messing around with symbology, yeah? So just a little quote just to cap that off. Louis XIV says to his son, Louis XV, the future king, was he a son or grandson, I think, because a lot of Louis's children, I think he's a grandson actually, because a lot of his children died and didn't manage to get there, which also has some interesting things to look at. But yeah, quote, "Do not follow the bad example that I have set for you. I have often undertaken war too lightly and too easily, and have sustained it for my vanity. Do not imitate me, but be a peaceful prince." So that was his advice, and sound advice, especially after ruining such a good time. It's like such an important and massive time, not just for France, for the whole of Europe, because really this time of peace, the Peace of Westphalia, it allowed for the continuation of the Golden Renaissance process. And I think it could have already ended there if we hadn't have had that peace. So that was probably the first attempt to wipe it out. Let's move forward to the 18th century, the 1700s, a great time. I'm going to go back, like I read this. Ballet Comique de la Reine, 1581, the time of Catherine de' Medici, created by the Italian Baldassare da Belgiojoso. For the court of Catherine de' Medici, the original idea for ballet was based on creating silent drama without words, but rather based on moving bodies that create images that speak. Ballet is a language based on steps which equal words, and when spoken or danced in context, they create a story ballet. Baldassare da Belgiojoso is the same name as Balthasar de Beaujoyeux, so that's the name in Italian, just in case you were wondering. So it was birthed in the streets and countryside of Italy during the 1400s, as we already spoke. was formalized under Catherine de' Medici in the French court in the 1500s, then became a form for opulence and divinity in the 1600s. But then in the 1700s, we restore. So this wonderful man on the left here, Jean-Georges Noverre, who today, for example, the International Dance Day that happens every year happens on his birthday, appropriately. Jean-Georges Noverre comes around in 1727. That's when he's born. And by 1750, he is responsible for creating what is called Ballet en Action, the British, the first translator of his Lettres sur la danse et les ballets was translated by an Englishman in like 1790. And they translated it as ballet d'action, but it's wrong. It should be ballet en action. So it's more specific. And it's to say that it's not just ballet for the sake of ballet. It's not just making steps and poses and da-da-da-da-da, all so that we can look beautiful, because it does do that. But it's not just for athleticism or so that you can be some statue. It is to talk, and it is to transmit and transcend ideas onto your audience, and to have their soul moved to a place where they start reasoning about why, how, what, where, and what are the causes of certain things in society or in nature or different types of phenomena, just to lift their thinking simply to a higher place. And a higher perspective of their self, not an egoistic one, but one which is connected with the divine. Ballet d'Action sought to reunify the split that had occurred between the essence and the form. So Louis XIV is responsible for that. It's in his court that he especially had turned ballet, especially the narrative form. Of course, under him, like we said before, the form is getting made better, more steps are being made, and he's fine with that. But nobody's allowed to make stories unless they're about him. So we have a breakdown of the essence. The form gets a lot better under him, but the essence really breaks down. So we had a split, and it's because he takes the essence for himself and becomes a dance of poses where he would literally walk from space to space, as we could see in that picture before, which is like, I remember when I first saw it even as a kid, it made me giggle. Because it's just so like, I mean, we can see with the way he's like leant back and everything. He's like, bye-bye now. It's so static, and there's no dancing going on. He's literally just, there's no skill involved. He's walking from place to place. And he's wearing high heels. How can he be dancing? Like, he's walking from place to place. The high heels were to make him look taller, by the way. And he's just literally striking a pose. And then walking, striking a pose. Okay, so it's not dance. It's we should call it posing. Whereas this man is using a mixture of poetry, music, design, so the setting, and dance, the four in one, not just posing and setting. So where are we? Yeah, he sought to reunify the split because he knew what the former monarchy had done. So he was like, it's my responsibility as a Frenchman to sort this out. So I would say what Louis was doing, it's not ballet, but it was rather ballet sans essence, like just without the essence, because the essence was stolen for the sake of vanity. Ballet d'action or en action is best described as follows. So Jean-Georges Noverre, he said, we got to have rational plots, no more illogical or insane plots about some demigod. Ballet should be rationally constructed. Stage action should be coherent, like obviously, otherwise why is everyone coming? And with each scene consistent in tone. So a kind of theme, right? Theme and variation is important, but the theme first. Otherwise, how can you variate without a theme? Or how can the variation be understood without a theme? So variety and contrast can be displayed throughout the ballet if you have strong themes. You can have more variety, which is what he understood. These are the paradoxes and the coincidence of opposites that appear in art. So also truth over nature. Like, he was absolutely, specific in that. Noverre did away with the symbolism and abstractions present in the court ballet. mythological creatures could only be used, sorry, figures could only be used in ballets if they were motivated by human emotions and human experiences. You couldn't just have, you know, a fawn, as we're going to get to later, like a fawn doing naughty things to itself in a forest. You couldn't just have that on stage and that be considered art. Like, no, not in 1700. In 1900, yes, but not in 1700. We've fallen. Masks were abolished under Noverre. Instead, he chose to exhibit the face and wanted human expression to communicate emotions and understanding to the audience. Narrative context using each character as a defining definition. And then also costume reform. And we can see in these pictures here, the costume reform was essential. Nobody could move in those costumes. It wasn't really the intention for them to move. It was immobile. And a lot of modern art is immobile too. And that's how I say romantics and moderns are the same. Dancers should be dressed in lighter fabrics and costumes to increase mobility and choreographic possibilities. Large, cumbersome costumes that are full of jewelry and stones that were over-embellished were done away with. So really good choices. I've got some other things here. Props, essential. Lots of props were brought in, scarves, different things to give more character definition and context for the scene. Circular seating, as we spoke before, around the stage was common. Went back to that because we wanted to have the artist at the center, not the king or the queen. Combined poetry, music, design, and dance. So we had the 4-in-1. So that's the thing about ballet. It should never be split from the others. They're all one of the same. You need music to dance. You need a set to dance to something, like to actually have an initiation of why I'm dancing. And the poetry is the story. So I'm using words like, and what Jean-Georges Noverre also did is he encouraged his people very much, like, you need to study the story before you go and start choreographing. So he was absolutely principled on these things. He was always encouraging fellow choreographers, like, you need to know other arts and other forms of education to bring your creation closer to the truth, right? So he took dance away from exotic and grotesque traditions involving those masks, like Casanova, very Venetian with the masks, and overly decorated costumes, all to basically impress upon the public that I am great, rather than the public actually to feel, wow, I really love this. So it's more tyrannical and impressing upon them rather than them being genuinely impressed. He also insisted, choreographers must be well educated on subject matter and also additional subjects to increase truthfulness in the ballets. He also increased the artistic collaboration. Before, they didn't want anybody talking to one another, but he brought all of the different parts together. So he was like, if we're making a ballet, I need the designer, I need the costume, I need the librettist, I need the conductor, I need everybody in the same room, and we're going to make the ballet together, not just me make the ballet and then put it to music. He let the music also, develop his imagination. Just to mention as well, some of his friends were, Marie Antoinette was his student, because this is literally just before what we're about to discuss next, the Enlightenment, or the French Revolution, which is the beginning of the Enlightenment. So, or it's kind of already begun. Like the slippery slope has already begun for sure. And it's people like Jean-Georges Noverre, and I've got a list at the end, but Marie Ayard, Marie Salle, Charles Diderot, Beethoven, Mozart. All of these people represent the Platonic tradition, the Golden Renaissance, but we already see the slippery slope of the Romantics coming in and saying, no, you don't need principles anymore. You just need sense. We can get away from God now and principles and tradition. We don't need that to govern us anymore. We are able to govern ourselves without those principles. And it's like, no, you definitely need those principles to govern thyself. Now we have another important guy I like to mention because he's British. He's going to come up again in a bit, but his name is David Garrick, and he's like, I knew about him before, but I've really gotten into him this time to see what he did because I went to the theatre, the Royal Drury Lane Theatre in London many times to watch musicals and different shows, and his plaque was always there because he built the theatre or commissioned it. Yeah, he didn't build it, of course, but he commissioned it. He paid for it to be built, and of course, intervened on some of the design aspects because he's just brilliant mind. But he was basically a theatre director as well as an actor, as well as a musician, you know, as many artists who consider themselves true artists, platonic artists, they will study many, not just one. They want to be multidimensional and they want to bring all of that into their creation. So David Carrick, by the way, Jean-Georges Noverre was actually friends with Mozart. They had a writing. He was friends with Voltaire as well. Voltaire is a character that got around, but more for just enjoying the conversation, I think, rather than actually agreeing with him. And like I say, taught Marie Antoinette. So here we have again some ironies. Marie Antoinette and Louis XV, they're not that bad. There were even discussions already before the revolution happens to open up the system of governance. And I think that there were genuine Republican characters in France, like Lafayette, that were organizing and they were going to work with the monarchy to reorganize the nation state of France, to give the public more self-governance, more of that ability to self-govern, but at the same time not doing away or annihilating the monarchistic role because it has an important role, and institutions are important. I was just reading Matt's thing this morning on religious institutions, and as a kid, like, you know, I didn't really agree with that stuff, but now as a young adult, like and for many years now, for a good 10 years since my initiation with Schiller, I've been a strong supporter of institutions and platforms because honestly, without those platforms, we would not be that good. Like, you know, I know with my own experience, as I said before, I would have stayed in Rochford as an Essex boy, and that's all well and good, and that innocence is great, but I would have never become and experienced all the worldly things that I have without this education. So those institutions like the Royal Ballet, even though it's like not ideologically perfect, or I should say imperfect, like it tries to be too perfect, um, it's still a great platform, and thank God for it because it's created an enormous amount of very famous dancers and has opened up the potential for any person to become a ballet dancer, which is of course a wonderful thing. It lacks its principles today, but we're going to get more into that and talk about why. Garrick actually called Jean-Georges Noverre the Shakespeare of dance. So there you go. And I just wanted to also mention in these pictures here, we have Auguste Vestris with Marie Angiolini. She's Italian. He was French. He's considered like the god of dance. So like one of the greatest male ballet dancers that ever touched a stage. And it was because of his mastering of the technique, one, but most importantly, it was the fact that that mastering of the technique allowed for him to have so much joy, as you can see in the picture below, and so much freedom in his expression of the story and how he played characters. And he was doing all of that with his head facing backwards while he's performing an extremely difficult développé, all with an opposition. He's not even looking in the place that he's going. So he was capable of doing some extraordinarily mind-twisting steps, and with a lot of renverse and a lot of contra elements in it that come from Da Vinci. Let's quickly. This is the beginning of the end. The Enlightenment, or rather the calm before the storm. On the left, we have Immanuel Kant. And on the right, we have Jean-Jacques Rousseau. They both represent opposing sides. Jean-Jacques Rousseau is with the Romantics, and Kant is with the moderns or the formationists. I don't know, but the people who love their lines and love their rules so much that they kill the essence, and on the other side, they love the essence so much that they kill the rules. Neither are correct. The Age of Enlightenment was a philosophical movement that emphasized freedom of expression and the eradication of religious principles. These ideas caused criticism among philosophers who believed art forms should speak to meaningful human expression rather than ornamental art forms, as Louis XIV had done himself. So no ornaments, only human soul and expression, please. This follows, so no material, only immaterial ideas. This follows from the philosophical battle between Plato and Aristotle on the nature of human beings. On the Platonist side, if art is to be considered good or great, it best be based on the universal principles for the common good and bring about greater understanding as to what encourages the individual or nation to act for the well-being of the other, and why that serves their own image. Rather, the Aristotelian approach would argue that while there are governing principles, not all humans can know and understand them, and therefore would be better served by an absolute ruler or elite who take care of everything for them while they live a life of pleasure. My 2 cents on it, at least. During this time, 1780 to 1900, we have a wave of romanticism and the beginnings of modernism being entertained in all forms of art, from the likes of Monet. People know Monet, the flowers with the blurred lines. Debussy, we know Debussy too, the classical music with the blurred lines. Claire de la Lune. And which again is like Nuit de la Danse. You know, they love the rituals at nighttime, the pagan sex, they love it. And Berlioz, I actually danced to Berlioz once and it gave my body pain because the rhythm was just awful. I had to like go against instantly and there were no transitions and no bridges to things and it really hurts. The images begin to become fuzzy. Lines are not clear and the boundary conditions for beauty and aesthetics start to be erased as if they don't exist. Rules are no more. Create without reason, and for that is true freedom. A complete lack of responsibility for the future. Romanticism aims to take on the appearance of freedom and liberty when in fact it represents an eros-like or erotic form of freedom. This freedom is premised on being free from principles and seeks to erode the forms that are essential to master to be able to create humanist art. Rousseau's noble savage is the aim, an individual free from reason or principles that seeks only to satisfy their senses for their own pleasure. And this is the age that brought around the fascist regime of Napoleon Bonaparte. Because we have the senselessness that comes, which throws everybody into disarray. After the economic upheaval, first you have the economic upheaval. So first you destroy the good intentions of Colbert and Mazarin with Louis XIV and his grand finale of wars that left France in ruin. And then his son, who, again, very bourgeoisie, but not a bad person, much like Louis XIV, like, you know, not absolutely a bad person, just soft around the edges. He basically becomes the fallen because, well, he has his head cut off and you have a reign of terror that is all started 100 years prior by his own father, who actually is the slippery slope. So it's very ironical that we lose our head if we start to slide down this slippery slope. And your children probably will too. Like the dynasty will suffer. The future will suffer. And it did. And then France was plunged into like all of that beautiful culture in the 16 and 1700s was done away with in the Reign of Terror. So all of these dancers that we're going to mention, they have to leave. In music, for example, this actually led to the abandonment of rules pertaining to the relationship between the notes and scales. The term motif started to be blurred as the narrative component of art became more blurry and less principled. This soft approach to art, beauty and reason are no longer the defining cause, but rather how the individual feels about certain stimuli. The world is now here for us, and we are not here for the world or to discover it. An art of pleasure rather than an art of universal cause. In dance, we can make a clear example in that dance, for the sake of momentary pleasure, is simply romantic and just to have fun. Ballet, when done according to its original principles and aesthetics and guided by a motif that has a universal theme, rather than simply be for fun, though fun it is guiding and nurturing its audience to a greater ideal of themselves and their society, a greater image of their fellow people. The very nature of ballet lifts the soul of the observer, as the steps even have the quality of immortality that is in the narrative too. So it's built into the form as well, has to be. For the men, the jumps, the allegro and the grande allegro, and the suspense in the air, and for the women, the lifted point work, giving the appearance of floating. So the suspense in the air and the floating in the air both represent the immortal qualities of human potential embedded in the physical. Because that's the thing about ballet. It's the only one of the art forms that is expressed materially through the human body, which, you know, when faced naked is a little bit vulgar, actually. Of course it's beautiful, like the human body, but we all know there's a part of it which is a bit vulgar and is best hidden or cached. And that's what ballet does, using épaulement, right? That's why we call it like shouldering, and which essentially becomes shading, and shading sacred parts, you could argue. So I'm going to talk about fourth position lately, and its fifth position, open, with one leg in front of the other, croisé, crossed, and then put on a diagonal. So we cover the center, the pubic area. The physical side of classical dancing is, to put it mildly, complex, but stated summarily, it involves the interrelation of rotational or elliptical movement of the limbs in their sockets. So we have this, and then we add curvature as well. And the releasing, activating of the natural spirals in opposition. The opposition is created by the muscle pulling and coming back like an accordion. This permits action on another plane. So you have these levels like your shoulders, your core, your hips, knees. They're all placed at the place where the joints are so that you can bend and open. Like you have the bending, which creates things like a retire. But you also have a développé, which is actually how you lift your leg into the air, because it's very hard to lift a straight leg. So you have to bend the leg to extend it to the position, because to actually lift it from the floor to that position, it's really hard. So we're creating a path of least action. So rotation and the release of opposition, not torsion. So not like gymnastics. One example of which would be taking a wet towel and wringing it out. So yeah. This is all right analogy. I could take like that. Those aren't my words. I would have taken a bit more time. But yeah, there you go. This age will lead to an age of barbarity, just as the empire intended. The romantics were simply to soften the senses of the audience. Now they will be awoken by the moderns in preparation for automation and the two world wars. Dun, 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 dun. The time of the machine, where well-cultured humans are no longer necessary. Only workers and worker bees, factory workers, will be needed for the militaristic machine that will be pumping out weapons. A time of chaos and fire and fury. And the culture hoisted onto them will crank them into gear. It will also dull human reason to the point where two world wars become very possible in the space of 40 years. Because everybody, I was a young child, always with my dad, when he was teaching me like history, I'd be like, Dad, why? Like, why you gotta go kill each other? And it's like, well, that's just the way the world is. And it's like, no, it's not. It's just not. It's a complete lie. It's not like that. It was made like that. And it's through art and culture first that we are softened to allow the way for the physical to take place. It's in the immaterial first that they break you, and now they've broken you internally. In the external, let's drop bombs. They won't even know what's happening. They'll be so confused. They won't even know who's running this. They won't even see that it's a lesser of you. You got two evils facing one another. And it's the intervention, which is truly good. But, between Germany and Britain, who's really good? Neither. One of the same. Britain still had concentration camps in Kenya, South Africa, and other places up until the 60s, long after Nazism was apparently defeated, right? Let's go back to optimism. So, Bournonville to Peterpur. Denmark and Russia rescue the Renaissance. Yeah, Russia. Russia, not America. Russia rescue the Renaissance. Enter Auguste de Bournonville, 1805 to 79, student of the original French and Italian star, having studied at the Paris Opera School, was now ready to take on choreography. Taught first by his father, Antoine.
Sorry for the glitch. That was weird. Keep going.
Not at all. Taught first by his father, Antoine de Bournonville, a former French army officer, but he was also a remarkable ballet dancer and ballet master himself. Just amazing, right? He's a military man, but he also is a cultured military man. This was the standard. And in his son's words, his father became enraptured with the revolutionary principles of liberty and equality and knew no greater hero than Lafayette, who was trying to avoid the French Revolution and bring about a Republican revolution like had just happened in America some 10 years prior or 20 years. He was then sent to train under the great Jean-Georges Noverre, who was still alive, the man in the prior clip, and his premier dancer, Auguste Vestris, considered one of the greatest of all time, at the Paris Opera before returning to Copenhagen to train under the Italian ballet master, Vincenzo Galliotti. This is a quote from Bournonville about his teacher, Mr. Vestris, who had formerly been one of the greatest dancers of all time. I am extremely satisfied with my Mr. Vestris, and what is more, he is very pleased with my zeal, diligence, and my instant willingness. He is very exact about the lessons and comes to class 3 times a week at 8 in the morning and 3 times a week at 9 and remains until 11. I get up every morning at 6 and always arrive one half hour before the lesson so that I am absolutely prepared when Mr. Vestris arrives. He has taken me in friendship and cultivated my talent with extreme care. He rigorously points out my faults, but treats me with consideration, which is the best teacher. Don't lie to me. Tell me exactly what is wrong, but consider that it hurts and is really hard. From 1830 onwards, Bournonville made his immortal mark on ballet, responsible for the creation of a reconstructed syllabus based on the original French and Italian principles for how the form should be constructed and how it should be taught to the student as well. It's important. The book's important, but the teacher's even more important. Like, I know it because I've had so many tyrannical teachers that really hurt me. And I took time after to recover, and it takes longer to recover internally than externally. I've had operations and you recover in 3 months, but you don't recover the same way inside. You need a lot of light to get back to you. So yeah, that's sometimes the trouble with the schools today, like I saw so many children get expelled or kind of kicked out of Royal, failing exams or because of anorexia and and it's all caused, a lot of it's caused by the school and the regime. This all is done to increase the choreographic potential without losing the beauty and aesthetics that govern the form. And so new steps were made, and thus new ballets too. La Sylphide in 1836, Napoli in 1842, Le Conservatoire, funny, that's a funny ballet, that one, 1849. That's very much about the relationship between the teacher-student. So it's literally about that, and it's a ballet class set on a stage, and it is funny. It's kind of like, it's like somewhat a little bit abstract because of course it's a narrative. It's talking about something that people go through with their master every day. Like but it's an abstract setting. Like it's just a ballet studio with the teachers and with a teacher and the students, and they're at the bar, and it's literally talking about how hard it is and how the ballet class goes, and the relationship between form and sense, and how to have fun with something that's really, really hard. How to each day not become stuck with it, and to keep on reapplying your potential to discover ways of the path of least action, to because everybody is different. So there has to be this individual application too. The Kermesse in Bruges, wonderful story about three brothers who meet a genie, and the genie gives them three magic things, like a sword, a flute, and something else. And basically two of the brothers, they take their sword and a goblet or something, and they go off and they use their magic for bad, and it brings them to ruin. And when they return to the village, they find the one young brother who stayed behind with his flute. He actually used the flute for good, and he didn't tell anybody about the flute. And basically one day the village, there was like something that went wrong, and there was a big riot, and the flute brought happiness and joy to people. That was the magic. So when that happened, when a riot started, he got the flute out and started playing. He brought happiness to the whole village. And then on that day, every year, they celebrated that they avoided the riot because of the magic flute. Could actually be the basis for that story too of Mozart. So, and the brothers who come back from, of course, ruining their gift, have this, it's that thing of like prodigal son. They come back and they're like, oh, a bit ashamed, but also there's a great celebration that they've returned because they're safe back with the village and the family. And they also get to enjoy in the revelation of the younger brother who has brought happiness to the village. Super funny ballet. Yeah, something that hasn't been performed again in like probably 100 years, but it's a valuable piece of the culture and really unheard of. And even Belgium, I think this thing, the kermesse, is still like a big like cultural image, and like there's a literal day of celebration which is called like the kermesse, I think. And then also A Folk Tale, 1854. Those are just some. He did loads more. Giselle, not Giselle, sorry, that was by Jean Corali and Charles Perrault, but like loads of others. I danced Napoli and La Sylphide, and really wonderful ballets. His work is an important link to the golden traditions of past, as he resisted the excess of romantics that appeared around him during portray a more balanced human nature than his romantic contemporaries, who only considered human emotion as the dominant force. Yeah, in Bournonville's choreographies, it's especially important to note that instead of the man just lifting the woman around and the woman being central all the time, he created more equality between the roles, and they were more dancing together rather than him lifting her all the time. So there's still lifts because we need lifts to talk, to tell stories. We need height, we need elevation, but not all the time. Again, otherwise it loses its point. These things are this is language. So like I'm talking now, if I say the wrong words, it won't be understood. So it's the same in ballet. Like if you say the wrong words, like what are you saying? All of a sudden you're like misunderstood. So that's why it has to be based on first principles, because if we just take the form away from the principles, like again, like if we take the steps away, it just loses all of its meaning. Did I want to say anything else? No. I'll talk now about Russia. So the man who represents the Renaissance tradition in Russia is a man going by the name Marius Petipa. He takes us. He's born in 1818 to 1910, and he's the final. Like we would say, not the final. We'll get there, but like there's a big break between him and anybody else for real storytelling. Takes us on another journey, this time from Paris to St. Petersburg and Moscow, where he became the defender of beauty and reason in his own nation state, one that was already approaching the same dangerous waters as France had done some 100 years earlier. So these themes are like pretty, palpable, because it's just been 100 years since the French Revolution, and now we're gonna have a Russian Revolution, and it's just happening at the time that we're seeing the Renaissance be fountaining and flourishing in Russia with people like Tchaikovsky and Petipa, who, though, like, I've read things from EIR and from different magazines that I've found, and there are many conflicting opinions on the Russians because of certain political times that we've gone through. Like, for example, with EIR, when I'm reading in the 90s, there is a very strong anti-Russian kind of perspective, and I feel it damages some of the reason in assessing these characters. So Petipa is one who gets thrown under the rug with the likes of Balanchine and Diaghilev, and I have struggled to understand why, and still am struggling to understand why. So it's something that I would be willing to create a point of conflict on, and just not conflict, a point of resistance, just to really go deeper, because I think it's a wrong angle to take on this man. So I'm going to give my angle, and in my continuing studies, in my articles, we will all be offered more. So I will get to the bottom of it. So Petipa, like Bournonville, I mean, some of you might have heard of him. This guy made Sleeping Beauty, The Swan Lake, La Bayadere, The Nutcracker, like the biggest ballets that people currently know today, the biggest classical ballets in the world, were made by him and Tchaikovsky. Okay. So, and I love what they did, because I feel what they did is they took grandiose elements from what Louis XIV and people had done. They took elements of that, because it is useful in storytelling to have more extremes, but only if they're based on central themes. Only if you only have that excess of variety if the theme and the principle is so well done and expressed. And I feel Petipa did it really, really well. But what he does really, really well too is like use great amounts of folklore, like in his Don Quixote, for example, because Petipa had studied a long time in Spain. Sorry, I'm jumping. We're going to get there. So, like Bournonville, had also studied under the beauty of the French style while at the Paris Opera. He was, in fact, originally French, Marius Petipa. He was born in Marseille to French parents, Victorine Grassot, who was an actress and drama teacher, and Jean-Antoine Petipa, who was principal male dancer and ballet master with the Salle Bavot, which today is the Opera de Marseille. So his dad was a principal ballet dancer with the Marseille Ballet. Then Petipa was offered the position of premier dancer with the Marseille Opera 2. And sorry. Sorry, just 1 second. Got this thing here. Has
I've
everybody?
never, yeah, I've never seen that in my life. I suggest don't
Here you
worry
go.
about it.
So Petipa was offered the position of premier dancer in the Grand Théâtre de Bordeaux in 1841. He studied further with the great Auguste Vestris while he was there. So that's why I don't understand also how some of the people in Schiller and stuff had this opinion of him as being bad, because I don't, yeah, if you're taught by Auguste Vestris in Bordeaux under the French system, dancing leads in such ballets as La Fille de Magarde, La Péri, and Giselle, all classical ballets based on the classical tradition. He was also a celebrated and good partner, was invited to dance with the legendary Carlotta Grisi in Paris for a gala. And he started to choreograph his own works while in Bordeaux as well. In 1843, Petipa received the position of premier dancer at the Teatro del Circo in Madrid, Spain. For 3 years, he would acquire an acute knowledge of traditional Spanish dancing while producing new works based on Spanish themes. These include Carmen y Son Torero, Carmen and the Bullfighter, La Perle de Seville is another one. They never made it, these ballets never made it to the mainstream. Again, that would be really fun to find them. The trouble is nothing was filmed back then, so I would have to find the notation that it's written, where they've written the ballet on paper. Like we have the same for ballet as we have for music, so we have notation. There are many different forms. That is something I also wanted to take on, but it's too much. There are people who've done good notation and people who've done really bad notation, like the Eurythmic movement with Rudolf von Laban. But in 1847, Marius's brother, Lucien Petipa, premier dancer with the Paris Opera, sent an inquiry to Antoine Titus in St. Petersburg for Marius to be employed. At 29 years old, he accepted the position of premier dancer at the Imperial Theatre in St. Petersburg, in what was then the Russian Empire. Petipa's father also relocated to St. Petersburg like a year after to be there with him, and he taught the class de perfection at the Imperial Ballet School until his death in 1855. So like a full family of cultured artists, and they were all dancers. Like the dad and the two brothers, like Lucien and Marius, they both were dancers, but Marius's real genius came in choreography later. For his debut, the director of the Imperial Theatres, Alexander Godunov, commissioned Petipa and the ballet master Pierre-Frédéric Malvern to create the first Russian production of Joseph Mazilier's celebrated ballet, Paquita. First staged at the Paris Opera in 1846, and then the following season, Petipa and his father staged a revival of Mazilier's 1840 ballet, Le Diable Amoureux, The Devil in Love, which premiered under the title Satanella on the 22nd of February. The Devil in Love is also a funny story. It's a guy who is on a kind of life quest, and basically a girl tries to enthrall him or like enrapture him in love, and it turns out that the girl is disguised. It's actually the devil disguised as a girl, and then she tries to get him to fall in love with her, but he resists, and so she becomes his servant and follows him around. But then one of his female friends catches her as the devil and tries to convince him, oh, you're the girl who's your servant. She's not a servant. She's actually the devil who's trying to like work you into doing something not very good. I don't know what, but like you're being played with here. And I can't remember what the plot is in the end. Like this, the devil gives up the ghost upon being exposed, gives up the ghost. The next day, the girl doesn't come back, and then his mother tells him, you see, if you'd listened to my wise words, you would have never got so close to the devil. So it's kind of one of the first satirical stories you'd say on something which is a really taboo subject throughout history. And yeah, just fun. And the Paquita, well, what's funny is his brother Lucien had created the role. So Joseph Mazilier had created the role on his brother, and then he creates it for the Russians in St. Petersburg. It's just beautiful. In 1849, the great French ballet master Jules Perrault, he went to St. Petersburg to join Petipa. So I also don't understand that. Like, why would Jules Perrault go and join him in Petipa if this guy's a bad guy? Jules Perrault's definitely a good guy. He created Giselle, one of the standout classical ballets of Western Europe. So he arrived in St. Petersburg to aid the Imperial Theatre in reviving the creative spark which had been lost. And Marius was like Petepa was quite young at the time and still needed a mentor. So like that's the thing, like this guy knows he needs help too. No time was wasted. Petepa happily learning under Perrault's continental influence and competing with fellow choreographer Arthur Saint Leon, who was also a really good guy, two good guys, went to work on prior traditional ballets and their restoration, but now on the Russian stage for the Russian audience rebirthed. And I had something. Okay. Yeah. Well, see, originally I thought that there might be a problem, that there might be like a genuine conflict between Arthur Saint Leon and Petepa. That's what I thought that they were getting at. And it turns out, no, there was no conflict. They're one of the same training and same intention with their choreographies too. So it's just something that will come up in the articles and it will be explained with clarity. Let's move on to the next century, the age of the avant-gardians, the 20th century barbarians and the culture bomb. In 1909, Diaghilev, this renegade kind of brand that appears out of Russia, after not being accepted in Russia, he's actually fired from his position as an assistant to a director in the Mariinsky Theatre that was previously the Imperial. In 1909, he founded Les Ballets Russes, an avant-garde ballet touring company that was made up of some of the finest Russian-trained dancers at the time. These were Nijinsky, Pavlova, Vaslav Nijinsky, Anna Pavlova, Tamara Kasavina, Michael Fokin, Georges Balanchine, and Alicia Markova. They were all trained by the legendary Italian ballet master Enrico Cecchetti for around 3 years. Something that just before I forget, I'm going to say these things because this now gets a bit more informative because there was a lot more on this. This is what they did. They took classically trained artists, like instruments, because that's what dancers are. We're an instrument. We're like the violin. And you work on us and you use us as a muse to develop creative ideas. So what they would do is they take these great, fantastic artists that had been trained to the very highest standards by Platonists like Enrico Cecchetti, who has an entire syllabus developed around 20 adage exercises that you do over 6 days of the week that will give you the balance, strength, and poise needed to do great allegro jumps or petit allegro or battement or petit battement or batterie, which is a collection of petit battement and grand battement, so a collection of beated steps. So these are called enchaînement, which is in chains, like chaining steps. So like linking step to step to step to step to step with these, and the links are crossed over. So there's real transitions. There's not breaks between there's these bridges from step to step. So in ballet, we always talk about posing steps and also transition steps. Transition steps lead to posing steps, but the pose doesn't come from nowhere. And that's where I think there was a little bit of a misunderstanding in the technique from some of the people I've read. So Diaghilev was part of a clique of artists who named themselves the Nevsky Pickwickians. Notable members include Alexander Benoit and Leon Bakst, and they went on to form a magazine, Mir Iskustva, which means the world of art, which was not the world of art at all up until that point. It completely promoted a new aesthetic movement and Art Nouveau in Russia, which had no relation to the near past. Instead, jumped all the way back to a primitive pagan past, like before, Christian or even any semblance of modern civilization had appeared, and took that as the inspiration for modern art. Like it's a complete travesty and a complete assault on this humanist process. So it's notable that Sava Mamontov was a principal financier of the magazine and movement. He bought a small town north of Moscow named Abramtsevo estate and set up a group of Slavophile artists there. He also financed many modern Russian composers, such as Mussorgsky, Rimsky-Korsakov, and Borodin. These were three composers who are part of a group of composers called the Five. They are all avant-garde composers, like modernists, who Tchaikovsky was against. Like he did not like them and had a lot to criticize about them because they were destroying the Renaissance principles while he was trying to uphold them. So already there we can see like Tchaikovsky's like the end of that process, and the Five, they make five to kill the one. You know what I mean? Like they have to create a lot of to get rid of this awesomeness, like this beauty. So there's this group, this mafia-like group that basically hijacks classical music in Russia, and instead of classical music, now we have noises, very mechanical, factory-like noises. So yeah. Notable ballets of Les Ballets Russes include Scheherazade, which is a good story actually. It's from the 1001 Nights of Arabia. But that's what they did, right? They took classical stuff and then destroyed it. That's just what they're doing. So don't be confused. It's just they're gonna take Scheherazade and then the next night they're gonna do the Rite of Spring. No connection whatsoever. They're not intending to make a connection. They're intending to throw the public off, and to basically Diaghilev wants to make himself a new representative of Apollo, like a kind of demigod in France, and have everybody bow to him as the new avant-gardist. And basically everything that you were doing before is, you know, for silly, lofty people. So Mamontov is important because he was one of the principal financiers. He also was, yeah, they took a very famous Russian singer called Fyodor Shaliapin, who was one of the great Russian tenor bassos of his time. And again, like just destroyed him because made him do all of these operas that were like horrible, from like Mussorgsky or Boris Godunov, like the opera Boris Godunov, for example, from Mussorgsky, I think it is, or Glinka's, some of his operas, they're very harsh to sing, and the pitching is put very high, and it's like screeching on the vocal cords. So it's like when you put your nails along steel, that's the intention. It's also to damage the individual. Like if you can damage the artist, you must be damaging the audience as well, right? So Scheherazade, Petrushka, The Rite of Spring, The Firebird, The Afternoon of a Faun, Cleopatra, and Apollo. That's where they like no holds barred anymore. We're just gonna say it. And the costumes were designed by Coco Chanel, who was as Matt has exhibited, she's a Nazi collaborator. And so Picasso, also of the same sect, designed the sets for many of the above ballets, while Stravinsky wrote much of the music. Can we call it music? He wrote much of the sound. Other artists who would have work commissioned by Diaghilev include Claude Debussy, Sergei Prokofiev, who composed for the ballet Romeo and Juliet. Probably his closest to classical music there is, but still there's some seriously jarring scenes in that composition. And yeah, I danced it. It's a bit schizo. So let's say that. But there are moments of beauty, genuinely. He's not like Stravinsky. Eric Satie and Maurice Ravel, artists such as Vasily Kandinsky, Alexander Benoit, and Henri Matisse, and costume designers Leon Basque and Coco Chanel. These are all in the same kind of artistic mafia, and they're all here to hijack the classical tradition. And they create so many of these people. It's like a literal wave it's a bomb, like how the two world wars were too. You have the immaterial culture bomb has to soften the mind before we're going to actually blow up the world, because the people won't let you just blow up the world. That's the thing. Not people of cultured 1850, 1870, right? But 50 years later, things did change. So the company ended in 1929. It was only 20 years. And it died because he died. He died from diabetes, probably because he was very gluttonous. 20 years of showmanship that left the company in substantial debt and many once promising dancers now in limbo. And also mentally, probably in limbo too. Les Ballet Russe was a clear attempt to hijack the image of classical imperial Russia and was successful in promoting a barbaric pagan form of art stemming from a very primitive Eastern folklore that sought to present Russians as uncivilized. So that's the divide and conquer also, because we got to go fight a war with them. It was also a complete assault against the Platonic Christian Renaissance tradition that had transformed Europe into an economically advanced continent from out of a dark age. So it's not just to destroy Russia, it's really to destroy everybody on the continent and plunge them back into war and chaos when we've just had 300 years of economic like uplifting out of those Platonic principles. So it's the end of history, basically. Like that's what they're saying with this kind of art. And just to mention in the pictures upstairs here, we have Diaghilev on the left and Stravinsky. They're so happy, right? And down here on the left, we can actually see up on the roof. There he is. Look, there's the Sun King smiling down at everybody. Couldn't get more obvious than that. Then we've got animal, mannequins and stuff like that. Lots of cubism. The set for Petrushka was done by Picasso. This is the stage that the puppets are going to appear on. I tell you what, the puppet scene in Petrushka, anybody who wants to watch it, you can go on YouTube. I was going to show it, but it's, I don't want to give anybody any nightmares. I don't want to be responsible for that. Like, if you want to go watch it, you can watch it. It's on YouTube. It's 30 minutes long. I wouldn't watch all of it. I really don't want you to have nightmares. But within 15, 20, like within 5 minutes, you will see what I mean. There is so much, satanic symbology and masks, animal heads, things on pikes. Russians, by the way, are constantly drunk. Everybody's either in military outfit or in like some, babushka looking outfit. But yeah, it's not a universal scene. It does not represent Russia. It just represents some very dark aspects of pagan primitive Russia, which honestly everybody has. So why we make it just something from that nation? It's completely crazy, because if you look at America, I don't think America ever, and I might offend a lot of people by saying this, but like I don't think America ever reached the heights in art that Russia did. Well, especially with classical composition, because I don't think America ever produced a composer as good as Tchaikovsky. So, or a writer as good as Pushkin or Tolstoy. I mean, great writers. And we could open up a podcast debate on that. That would be fun. But like, yeah, it is of importance. Now we're jumping again to like 1970, 50, 70s. This is like everybody here should be more relevant with this. It is of importance that George Balanchine, who was a dancer in Les Ballets Russes, would go on to leave the company and found the New York City Ballet, and he would be financed by banker Felix Warburg and his son Edward, the economist and financier John Maynard Keynes, and the banker Nelson Rockefeller, who would appropriately build the Lincoln Center. It's not named after Abraham Lincoln, it's the name of the place in New York. Built the Lincoln Center for Performing Arts, where they would perform till today. I just went there like a couple of months ago to watch my friend perform in Midsummer Night's Dream. Brilliant. So originally a Venetian family called Del Banco, the Warburgs, based in Hamburg and New York, of this modernist art was created. Balanchine certainly belonged to the gods of Olympus, and his allegiance made clear when he created his homage to Apollo in the very same named ballet. Balanchine's creations are renowned for their lack of color and human expression. Costumes are black or white usually, and the set is an equally empty canvas. Lighting is focused on the body parts, and the face is not important other than just having a good time. It's that razzle dazzle thing of American Broadway, you know? The technique kills the French and Italian epaulement angles and forces dancers to face en face in a vulgar way directly at the audience, leaving both the audience and the dancer feeling exposed and two-dimensional without any motive, nothing pulling them forward or pushing them back, just kind of stuck. Balanchine, who started his career under the Bolsheviks, guided by Goleyevsky's, this name is important. He's going to come up a lot, like in this book that I do, like there's going to be a lot more on this. Erotic gymnastics, was personally committed to destroying beauty like his mentor and controller, Igor Stravinsky, who had been Diaghilev's friend. While Stravinsky, following Wagner, ignored tonality, ignored the major-minor relation, which is, by the way, major-minor relation in music is the quasi-efface relation in ballet, which it says. So Balanchine ignored the en face and quasi relationship, like the open to the light and shaded from the light, right? And it creates a kind of positive, negative, but not so extreme that there's no relation. That's the thing. So without the major minor relation, there is no such thing as real dissonance, which is talking of that relation again. There's no modulation, there's no mode of thinking. Everything sounds like everything else. It's blank, it's white, it's shade, it's not color. Or it's not color and shade. That's the thing. It's both. So in Balanchine, that meant replacing the beautiful, the symmetric epaulement, those coincidence of opposites, by the perfectly symmetric rectangular figure. And so on the left here, we see pictures in a newspaper of the dancers in the Rite of Spring. And I love how honest people were back then. See, everyone's too diplomatic nowadays. Like, just do away with it, because like we really need to get to telling the truth. And the twitching, bobbing, turn your toes in cubist dance. They didn't even call it ballet. Like, they just wouldn't, because people really did know back then what things were. And I can read in the small writing. So it says Nijinsky's revolution in choreography, like they're being a bit sarcastic, as you know, it calls for it. Because you want to be crazy, I'm going to be a bit crazy. So the post-impressionistic and prehistoric dance, Sacre du Printemps. Nijinsky appears not to be content with his success in the graceful dances, which have made his name so familiar to all lovers of the Russian ballet. That's the thing. He was a fantastic dancer, but he was squandered on this crazy ideology. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to destroy the potential for anybody classical to come through. That's what I felt. Also, I was feeling like, why are you training me all of this classical and then you're making me do modern stuff? Like, so dancing should, he thinks, strike a new line, just as post-impressionists considered that reversion to primitive forms in painting may direct the arts into new channels. Therefore, it was to the most primitive form of his art that the great dancer determined to go. The result being that we were treated to one of the most astounding and nerve-shattering dances that have ever been performed. To Stravinsky's music, in itself blood-curdling from its weird dissonances and orchestral groans and squeaks, a prehistoric people regaled us with bobs and jerks, turned-in toes, Swedish exercise-like movements, and in one place a simultaneous shaking like a jelly, similar to Teddy Payne's famous performance with the bombs in a former Gaiety piece. It must be confessed that the higher critics of dancing seem to see in this reversion to the excessively primitive a movement of enthralling interest in the history of choreographic art. Further developments will be awaited with interest. So not convinced at all. And disturbed by their decadent and depraved ideology. And if we go to any quotes by these people, I was watching a video of Stravinsky talk about his Firebird. None of these guys believe in their art. They have no real reasons for why they're doing it. They're paid. They're paid, they're bought, and they're sold. So the taming of the shrews. Let's bring it back to sanity again. Cranko intervenes on insanity. Here, I'm just going to show you some videos of everything we've been talking about. John Cranko. So John Cranko comes around. He's from South Africa, and he has gone to study dance in England, I believe, which by that point, London, with the creation of the Royal Ballet, had become, because I think that was the intention, was to, I mean, I can't say it with surety, but probably the intention was to make sure that the greatest ballet company would end up in London. But it's an imposition, and it's a bit of an imposter syndrome, because though good works were created for the Royal Ballet, most of them are based off of the previous great classics. Like, for example, Frederick Ashton recreated La Film Gardée and used the Cecchetti method. It's not like, he was brilliant, but and used the French Italian style with all of the epaulement and all of that. You can watch it on YouTube again, and we'll see those spirals and those fourth positions. I would love to do a technique class with y'all where I could actually make everybody stand up and get you to feel the opposition and how that creates length and poise, and how beautiful I could make you all look very quickly. Like, not, and I'm not saying that you don't already, it's just we could add more. That's why we call it posture. It's like platforming what is beautiful about you. And there is really something beautiful in every single student. So that's the thing, like in a ballet class, you will find it. In art, you will find it. Only in art, I think, can you really find the true essence, substance of an individual. Let's watch some. I love Cranko because for me, like John Cranko, South African, really like, again, kind of like, not like rags to riches, but in terms of mentally, like knows nothing about ballet, coming from South Africa, like hasn't got there yet. It's there now. There's two companies, but like not on a cultural, like foundational level where it's actually being developed on the continent for the people of that continent, which is my intention, which would require new syllabus, new form, like not entirely new form. We're going to take the classical, but we've got to change things because the aesthetics are different, the culture's different, the folklore's different, right? So we have to bend. That's the curvature also has to be in the thinking. I love Cranko because more than anything, he didn't create a new syllabus. He found all of what was already there was enough. And my God, I never knew anybody use it as well as he did. Petipa, Bournonville. For me, no one tells a story the way this guy does. And no one made me laugh or cry the way this guy did. So I've watched them all pretty much. Like I've watched Bournonville. I've done all of them pretty much. No, I mean, like I have. Like I've done all of them. Like I danced in 3 companies and all of the major choreographers, whether it be Bournonville, Jean Corali, Marius Petipa. I've danced Nutcracker, Sleeping Beauty, The Taming of the Shrew, Onegin, Romeo and Juliet. Yeah, Lady and the Fool. Just it goes on. Like I've got catalogs of it, and having danced all of it, there's no one who touches there's no one who will get you to play another character the way he got me to go for it. The way, and with rationale, because the way he set up the ballet, the way he's choreographed the ballet, the way Shakespeare did with his plays too, just gave us so much freedom and liberty because the form was so good that we could really go there with the essence and it was still always in keeping. It's very hard when the form is so good, when the principles are so well set, it's very hard to actually do too much essence on top because as a human being, you know when you've gone too far. And if you want to behave like an idiot, go ahead. But as an artist, that's not your intention. Your intention is to have fun. And so you go far, and like I got thrown across a stage once, right? It was an accident. Like the guy just, we had dynamics. He pushed me, and my feet came off the floor, and I landed at the principal girl's feet. I was supposed to pick her up and carry her to another place, and I completely missed my mark because I got thrown. And even going that far and with that calamity, the audience loved it. Like we got such a laugh because that was real. Like I remember, like I had an out of body experience because it was so real. So yeah, it was scary at the same time as like, oh my God, I've got to do something with this, and this is really like me as a character now, and this has gone wrong, and now we have to respond to real events, and it's really exciting, and the audience loves it too. And that's the beauty when ballets are made so well. There's all of this potential for mistakes because if you give the individual the potential to go there, like they're probably going to go there, and that's going to create something real. And that's what Shakespeare did too. Like so much liberty on stage, not just like read the exact word that I write. Like, no. It was like if you felt that something else was coming, just go say it. I might even write it down. So let's watch. This is a kind of trailer. This is Onegin. I love the context, the narratives that you picked. Cranko's ballets, major ones. Taming of the Shrew, Onegin, um, The Lady and the Fool, Romeo and Juliet. What else? I need help now. Anyway, the three major ones, the ones that we did every year, pretty much, whether on tour or in Stuttgart, because everybody around the world wants to see them, are on Onegin, The Taming of the Shrew, and Romeo and Juliet. They're all Shakespeare stories. And for me, Cranko did the best job of sticking to the story, to
Is
sticking to the
it
actual play.
isn't Onegin Pushkin or
Sorry,
somebody?
Onegin is Pushkin. Um, so yeah, it's just that one that's not. But most of the other ballets were Shakespeare. He had a thing with Shakespeare, and I think it's that thing of like once you found your mojo, he found the key for it, and then people just wanted more. Like so, he did a lot of even like lesser known stories. Is that what I want to say? Yeah. So let's watch Onegin first because it's a great tragedy by Pushkin. I actually went to the statue of Pushkin in St. Petersburg when we were performing Onegin in Russia, and that was just wicked. I have a photo and great story about Pushkin. He actually ended up dying the same way as one of his characters. So in Onegin, Lenski, who dies by duel because Onegin flirts with his wife to be in at the party in Paris, and Lenski gets really jealous, and he challenges Onegin to a duel right there in front of everybody, slaps him with the face with the glove. Wicked scene for us on stage. We always love that one. And slaps him in the face with the glove, throws it down on the floor, and goes, "It's happening." And of course, Eugene's like, "All right, mate, like let's do it," because he's a callous, nasty friend, like not a real friend, just there to leech off of Lenski. And Lenski dies. And that's what happened to Pushkin over a lover too. So just fun little story there. Like they met the same fate. He met the same fate as one of his characters.
Step into Wix Studio, the platform for agencies and enterprises, and turn website layouts into
That's the spiral, renverse. That's sometimes in the list there's Contra 2. Those are some folklore elements. Mime, lots of mime. A bit of fantasy. That was the trailer for Jaeger. I hope there with some of the lifts, you saw the spiral action that I'm talking about. Cranko for me, he actually did develop new steps, and it was in the pas de deux. There are lifts that he created that had never been seen before, and some of them are like throws where the girl is spiraling around the man's head. Some of them are actual flip, what we call a flip lift, where she takes one point like an anchor, like a hand, and pushes off that hand to do a jump where I catch her at the end. So that's the one where she's like, what did they call that? It's like a dove something, dovetail, where she's like two legs in arabesque and then the chest up and he's holding her. Like it's a really hard lift. I remember my brother having many challenges with it, but like he mastered it in the end. And when they get it right, it's like again that path of least action thing. Something very complex becomes like momentary simplicity, and it's beautiful. And I think some of those lifts, what they do is they pull you onto the stage, and you start living it with them, and then you're transported. And the story of Onegin anyway gives us all the form we need. It's a fantastic story about well, you don't know what you've got until it's gone. And the story of Onegin is one of pride before the fall. And the thing is, he rejects the love of Tatiana there. So when she, in the first act, gives him her letter to tell him how much she has this very open and beautiful love for him, he completely rejects her, but not in a nice way. He doesn't let her down easy. He rejects her in the way of like, you're just a silly little girl. And he rips up her letter in front of her face. It's a love letter. Rips it up in front of her face, drops it on the floor, and leaves her. And at the same time, he's kind of a Dorian Gray because he's showing everybody else in the party in Russia that he's a nice guy, but he's actually this bourgeoisie, nasty kind of vain person. Anyway, he goes back in the second act to Paris, and well, after they have the duel and he kills his best friend Lenski in the duel, he has a bit of a reflection. And at the end of that act, we see him like suddenly realize, oh my God, what have I done? And then in the preceding acts, we see that reflection dawn on his soul, and the pride falls and he starts to have a lot of shame. So then he goes back to Russia to see if anybody remembers him because he's gray and old now. And he sees Tatiana grown up. Now she was a lot younger than him. So now maybe he's like 50 and she's like 35. She's in the prime of her life and he sees her and he's like, oh my God, he's immediately feels like he's falling in love with this momentary beauty. And he knows her from the past too. So he skulks around the Russian palace, seeing if she notices him, and she doesn't. And then at some point, while she's dancing with her husband-to-be, he presents himself. And she's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, well, I don't really know, but now I'm here. I love you. And she's like, well, what are you on about? So he writes her a letter begging her to go with him and leave her whole life behind it, you know, that she's spent all these years building since he broke her heart. She's become a grown woman now, married to a military officer called Gremin, who's like obviously a stand-up, honorable man who loves her dearly. And you see that in their pas de deux. He's not frivolous with her. He treats her with the absolute utmost care. And Onegin doesn't do that. And sure, there's more passion, but you know, without reason, passion's just a painful experience. So that's the thing. Pride before the fall, then he falls, then he tries to get it back. And it's like, you can't get back what you've lost. And also you've made some pretty unforgivable mistakes, you know, killing your best friend and destroying this girl's broken, like, you know, juvenile heart. So we can't take everything back as well. And I think the tragedy of Onegin is that he does become a good guy in the end. He is changed by his reflection, but it doesn't necessarily save the shame. You still have to deal with the reality. But he does change, so that's good. There is an optimism. There's definitely an optimism. And honestly, like, what's crazy is at the beginning, you really don't like Onegin, but by the end, you feel sorry for Onegin because he did change. So you find your humanity too. Taming of the Shrew, this is comedy, pure comedy. And in here, we have a lot of like opposition and contretemps. So like loads of opposition, just a lot. This is the whole ballet, so I'm not going to play all of it. I'm going to do sections. It's Hortensio. Quite funny. That's Lucentio. I don't know if anybody knows his story. His name is Shrew. They're all trying to court her right now. Premio. More of a mime artist. Funny. that's the beginning. That's literally the opening. And it's funny because these three brothers, they're trying to marry the daughter who's just come out here. But the rule is, in those days, you're not the younger daughter's not allowed to marry until the older one has. The trouble is, the older one is a shrew. So that's why the story is called Taming of the Shrew. And the shrew, it represents something untamed and wild. And so she's a girl who has no decorum. Her name's Katerina. And she's the one who just threw the water over all these boys. And basically, the funny thing is, she doesn't want to get married to any man. She doesn't want to submit herself to anyone. So she is trying to stop with all her might her younger sister getting married too. So whenever these lovers show up, she takes a saucepan of water and throws it over them. And then she's going to come out now and go a bit nuts. And this is where Cranko, like, he does break the form. Like, not all of these are ballet steps, but not for nothing, for the sake of telling you something, for the sake of really going back to the street, the folk, and bringing something from there into the classical that means something social, something that is relative to us in the day-to-day. And that's why that's important. Actually, I'm not going to show you that. Because I want to finish now, but I'm just going to show one part of there, which is oh, that's funny. This ballet really is like, it's so good. So if anybody wants to take the time today or tomorrow at any time, take this link and go watch it. It is so funny. I mean, Taming of the Shrew anyway, if you've ever read it, like, it is a funny, funny play. This is the end. This is the beauty. Like, they've fallen in love now. This is Petruchio and Katarina. I think, yeah, it is. I always get confused. Tatiana or Katarina? Oh, it's Olga. Anyway, the shrew is now fallen in love. She's given up the battle, and she's happy for it. Petruchio doesn't force her to fall in love with him. He finds creative ways to get her to fall in love with him, and it works. And so instead of just submit to him, there's also this, he's also submitting to her. And that's something that Bournonville wanted to have in ballet, a certain kind of equality, not like communist, but equitable, like that our value is the same. Okay, we have different strengths and weaknesses, and we have slightly different capacity. Of course, being stronger, I should support her and she can lean on me. But she's still strong, so she can dance by herself too, and I can dance with her instead of for her. So it's a beautiful idea, and it's both in the form, but also right here in the actual ballet. So let's watch it. I'll be quiet and we'll... was the motive. It's the motive for the whole ballet. That part at the end is fantastic. That little like fist turned down, that is the motive. That is the theme. The theme, the taming of the shrew. That's how she is at the beginning. Fighting, fighting, fighting. And that actual step comes back as a theme many, many times. And it's that sequence that shows her as the shrew. So they make that's a joke at the end. And that's the end. Like it's so brilliant. Anyway, I'm almost done. Here's my list of Here's my list of Plato's artists on the left side and Aristotle's artists or Apollo's artists on the right side. A small oh, I should have taken one of those out. Danton's not an artist. I had it in there, but yeah. Anyway. Thank you, everybody. That's the end of the class.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, that was an authoritative composition, man. I really, really appreciated that a lot. And actually, you know, as I was, you've introduced me enough absurd expressions of ballet since I've known you that I've now gotten a bit. I have a sense of contrast of just the hyper abstract reductionism ugliness on the one side, as well as this uptight, you know, stick up the ass, really, really formal boring stuff on the other extreme. That I really appreciate this Cranko material a lot more because of that sensitivity to these two opposing extremes. So that's really
yeah, because I'm just gonna say like what you see there as well, that's in like 1960, 70, right?
Yeah.
And basically everything is good. Like, I mean, we have like we've been flirting with things before then, like, but Cranko says that things are still good. And what we see a lot is in those creations, like the legs don't go above 90 degrees. There's not this maximized flexibility or this over accentuation on certain things. So nowadays, if you go see like what put a lot of people off the Russians, for example, was this overstretching and this maximized turnout where the leg and the feet are by the head. And it's like, hang on, that doesn't feel right. Like, why are the feet suddenly being put by the head? Like, that's not glory. So like that's the thing. Like if you take anything out of its context or its proper place, it can very quickly become ugliness. And I think that's the danger with art and culture. The slippery slope is in your ego would rather, you know, the path of least action on an ego level is like cutting steps. It's taking less time to master. And not just master the technique, but master the essence too. Because if you haven't got your point, your anchor, your theme, like that, dun, 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 then we have no leitmotif. We have nothing that pins us to the place where it all started. So there's no beginning, there's no end. Everything becomes wish-wash. And the great narratives, the beginnings and the endings are very strong. And that's so that we do actually remember what happened. They're like checkpoints in our mind. Flashcards that say like, oh, do you remember the bridge of how we got here? So like if we don't have those relations in art and culture, suddenly it becomes very tyrannical and draconian. And it's just like, learn this. And you're like, yeah, but why? And they're like, learn it. And you're like, you said that already. And it's like, it's like, learn what exactly? And they're like, well, reason. You're like, that's not reason, that's force. And you know, that was my education. Honestly, I just gave you like 5 seconds of my tussle, 8 years of tussling with some of like out of the 10 or 15 masters that I had, there were 3 that I didn't tussle with because they really loved me. And they were harder than anybody else on me. This is the paradox. The 3 teachers that actually made me were harder on me than anybody else. But they saw me. That's essential. If you're not talking to the soul, if you're not seeing the because once they asked me what the problem was, and I told them it's the orthodoxy, of course they all understood. They were like, well, yes, of course, then that's messing you up. And they managed to reconfigure because I was revolting. So they got me to being a professional ballet dancer. Like one teacher especially was named Milis Pakri from Estonia, and I got to mention his name because he's the one person responsible for turning me into a man, if I may call myself one. I was a boy until 18. But like the year before I graduated, I didn't know what was about to come. Just before I graduated, I went on a period of 3 operations. And thank God he turned me into a man before all of that happened, because I don't think I would have gone on to be a professional dancer and actually get through that bridge and go on to do 15 years of professional dance in 3 different countries without him instilling in me, like, for all of your talent and all your gifts, brother, you need to work on your form, because you're sacrificing everything because you have a problem with the ideology and it's not worth it. I don't want you to sacrifice you just because you've struggled with the orthodoxy of how this school teaches things. And he managed to get in there and tell me enough of the truth that I realized you're a real person. And then I actually started to follow him, and I had someone to follow, and then I started to develop. But bear in mind, in the beginning, he sent me out of class like 3 times a week. So
the surgery that you said you had gone in for 3 times, was that due to the more unnatural techniques of dancing, or like that was it? Okay.
Yeah. So like because of the we train so much in Royal, like technique, like just all the time, that basically my second operation especially, which was more like functional, because I couldn't tendu anymore, which is to stretch the foot. Because what was happening is when I was by like my third, tendu is the second exercise in the bar. So first you start with to bend, plie, and then you go to stretch. So you go opposition, and then you go to jeté, which is to throw, and then you go to fondu, which is to melt. And there's all of these opposition exercises throughout the bar. So you're going like hard, soft to create reaction and non-reaction and softness and accents and da. These are all the forms. These are all the steps that you practice for your body to be able to say something. But we spent so much time on the word that we didn't get much to language, and that's where we all died, because we were like, it's so hard. When am I going to be able to say something? And they were like, oh, that's not the point. And we were like, oh, what? So that part, it's just a lot of the schools today, you could say they've been decapitated, like the reign of terror, like they lost their heads. There's no essence to it anymore. It's just how high does your leg go and how wide are your splits, and
yeah, it reminds me a little bit of the case of the lifting arbitrarily of the tuning from the natural tuning of C256, which historically was in tune with the natural resonance of the human body that originates song to begin with, right? And by increasing that tuning arbitrarily to A440 and even higher, it could create, like a certain elitism, because not many people can do that. It's so unnatural, and it might sound kind of brilliant to be able to hit those pitches, but it breaks people's voices. So people are like bleeding at the larynx, and it's just like destroying a whole generation of musicians who could otherwise be beautiful singers. And it sounds similar to what you're describing about what they're expecting from the human body, that it cuts off many people who could prospectively learn how to be a beautiful dancer, and they're broken, or those who are able to compete in the dance world. But even there, you've got a high level of risk, as you've experienced directly.
Honestly, you just landed, like, making that reference to the tuning of Verdi and the anti-tuning that now takes place of Verdi's frequency. Yeah, that's exactly what they did, and I think I'm gonna call a chapter that the relation between 432 or whatever it is and high legs. Because they lifted the pitch, and it creates this elitist view of it, which is detached from the organic harmonies, like the actual harmonies that are are there rather than trying to race them and speed them up a little bit to make it more tense. So that's the thing. Also, like if you go watch dance sped up, it has that effect on you where you're sat there like, oh, like I don't feel like an angst. The same if you go listen to Beethoven done by von Karajan, for example, and then go listen to it by Wilhelm Furtwängler, it's like a different composition. It's
So
like it's really, really different.
on that note, I'm gonna open up.
I used to have to dance to Beethoven sped up, and
Yeah.
like walking out of there, I'd be like, oh my God, like I'm gonna have a heart attack at 32. Like I can't get out of here alive. Like these people are gonna kill me. You're like, shit, run. Excuse my French, but like it's really like that when you're on the side of stage and they don't play things naturally, and you're like, guys, I'm not ready. Like you didn't start right. Like it doesn't start like that. It can't start like that. And they jumpstart you like a car, and it feels the same way. And oh man, I used to do 120 shows a year like that. Can you imagine? Like just all the time the music like racing you, and you're racing music. It's like you can't win. You can't win. You're a dancer, like you're in the physical, like it's music, it's immaterial. You're always gonna lose. The audience gonna see you flat on your face running, trying to like keep pace with music. It's like you just feel like you're on a losing team the whole time. And that's what it was as a dancer. And that's why a lot of us also by the end were a little bit loony because we're like so washed out by the excess of physical work, because honestly, you never sweat as hard in your life doing a plie. But like when I asked my mum to do a ballet step, it's like so quick, like 5 seconds, she's like pouring, and I'm like, Mom, it's just a spiral. And she's like, what's that?
Mhm.
But it is, yeah. That's like
So let's open up for a couple of questions before we round it out. Also, I would ask you before we do that, do you have any good links so that if people want to watch a good quality production of whether Cranko or something else, that they can access it on either YouTube or some other website? Yeah, you can got some. Send me a list perhaps, and I'll make that
there's
available.
there's there's some like really great articles from Catherine Cantor that I heavily used. Like
Okay.
she's brilliant. Like there's some things with her that, like I said, like about the Russians. I don't know. I would love to open open her brain up and be like, yo, what's the whole anti-Russian thing? Because like I get it, but like I don't get it. So because there's an imposition, you've got to be able to play with the nuance, otherwise you're going to make these almighty mistakes because you throw everything under the carpet with communism. And I like so many people have done this to Russia, and it's like there was a strong classical tradition there before. So but anyway, her writings are brilliant. Catherine Cantor, like, is I can share some of those too, because she
Yeah.
talks about the golden section, and all of ballet is based on what Da Vinci discovered with anatomy. So like the way the spinal column is aligned, and if you go up onto point, so like the girls stand on point because that shifts the balance directly over your spine. Now you're on balance. Whereas when you're on a flat foot, you're not on your toes, you're not on your heels, you're on your bridge. So you're in between balance. But the moment you go up into point as a woman and you're on point, you're on your balance. And then it's like you shift the center slightly just on the side of your spine because you're not perfectly symmetrical. And then you can actually stay in air, suspended on point, which is about 2 inches wide. I've seen girls hold that position on point for like 5 minutes.
Whoa.
Yeah, like this, with their leg in attitude, like at at the back, like 5 minutes on a 2-inch block. That's like a warm-up. And they're like moving their head, like finding it's there. I just gotta put my chin. That's the nuance.
Mm-hmm.
And to get there, the sweat, it's like 20,000 hours of Like, okay, so like the 20 exercises of Cecchetti, the 6 days of the week, the six principles of Cecchetti, basically is 20 adagios. And you know what adagio is in classical music, right? It's
Go on.
stretched. It's a long curve. So it takes a long time to get to the position. And you need, like, doing a step quickly is requiring the least amount of energy. Stretching something over a long period of time, which is adagio, so like developing a leg and then staying there, that is the hardest thing to do in ballet because it requires balance, strength, and poise. So jumping, we can use dynamics, we can use momentum, we can take and throw away energy. But balance, no, you have to be you're in a tube where the air is spiraling up inside that tube. So your body is the tube, but your abdomen, what we call your core stability, is the air inside spiraling up inside of you. And that's what's holding you in balance. You're not static. That's why we sweat so hard. It looks static, but we have to visualize constant growth on the internal to hold that balance. We're not sitting, we're lifting. And not out or back. That spinal column literally has to, same way a plant grows. Like if you go watch a flower, like sped up on a camera, it doesn't grow straight up. It does this. And so the human body and form is based on the same thing. And ballet is based on that anatomy too. You can't go up and down. You need to take momentum from a place which is starting from an anchor, and then you're you know spiraling it into place. Otherwise everything looks aggressive, or the transitions get lost, and it starts to look like well, that's a complete inversion, but it'll start to look like romantic ballets where there's no connections with things and like the lines are blurry and blah 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 blah. Honestly, this is really hard to explain without having Yarl stood at a bar, because ballet is not poetry. So I need bodies to really do this. Like that,
All
I
right.
had to do
That could be
it.
one positive application for metaverse, maybe. So if we need possible positive applications for virtual reality, that would be one that we'll put on the list.
Good idea.
And until then, yeah, we got to just get some actual international physical workshops eventually set up. But until then, yeah, we'll have to keep it theoretical.
Yeah.
We have time for about 15 minutes. So I know that we have Elisa and Jerry, who I've noticed had a thought or a question. Yuri as well had a question on, is there a book or a site where I can review the pages Nick used in his presentation? Nick, please send me your PowerPoint and I will upload it and make it available for people to download on a click. So first up, Jerry, go for it.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Nick. That was an amazing presentation. You got me. There's so many things I was thinking about. Because on the one hand, you gave a class on ballet, which I'm beginning to understand, but you also gave us a class on how romanticism can destroy your culture. I love the way you weaved it in. And the one thing, yes, go ahead.
No, I'm always.
Oh, okay. The one thing I found fascinating was when you were describing the stage, that I guess the Italian version of it was the stage was in the middle and the audience would sit around it, and it's like the audience becomes part of it. They're going to learn something. And then when Louis XIV changed it and you just have the stage at the back, and it just reminded me of today. It's because we have the stage at the back and we're not there to learn anything from the performance. We're there it's entertainment. to satisfy our pleasure. And the rock stars and the movie stars are like kind of a modern version of the Sun King, and it's anyway, if you wanted to comment a bit on that, I just found that whole concept of the stage, the changing of the stage was fascinating.
Yeah, honestly, it's something I picked up on it myself and then spent time trying to confirm it. And like I haven't sourced it like full, but it was just something that came to me as I was doing the study. And I know it from the Royal Albert Hall in London has the same configuration as the Italian way. So the stage is not in the back or on the side. It's brought forward to the center and not sat all the way around it, but like I'd say like a good 6/8 sort of thing. Just the back is reserved for like the orchestra or whatever. They got to go somewhere. So it's that thing, like I watched ballets on that, and I remember as a kid, like, why are we doing it like that? And it just came back to me when I was studying this. I was like, oh, so we even have that in England, like different formats. The Royal Opera House is done like Louis XIV, but the Royal Albert Hall is done more like in the Italian way, where the proscenium's at the center. And because also what that does, like, when the stage is at the front like that, it creates a kind of elitist system in the seating. So the people who get to sit at the front, all the rich tickets, $150, whereas the people who sit in the guards, as we used to call it, right at the back, like the standing seats, they pay $7, and it already creates that. So that's also unfortunate.
Cool.
I think Shakespeare had a stage like that, didn't he? They called it the O, where it was the audience surrounded the globe. Yes.
Exactly. So there you go, Jerry. Like that's I think that is enough. We've kind of landed again there. Like that says that is the proper way of formatting, of presenting, at least. So that's a start. It's a great start for anybody looking to do it. And I honestly, I would think it would make the building a bit easier to build. Just as another little common sense point. Because I've seen what goes into the stages. It's a lot.
All right, Elisa, we just have time for one last one. So Elisa, go for it.
I wish we had a half an hour of questions, really.
Sorry.
Yeah,
we really don't.
But I just wonder, anybody have any ideas how we rescue art from UNESCO? And I know that Ballet British Columbia has been taken under the umbrella of UNESCO. So that's sort of death to a ballet company that started out in British Columbia. And a lot of older ladies I know are heartbroken because it was they were working on it in the background, in previous generations. So I'm just curious, anybody have any ideas?
Winning it back. I mean, there's loads of hope, and it starts with, I think, with the individual. I think we're back there again. I don't see, having been in the industry as well and tried to at least talk, guys. Yes. So, when people know so little and they're running the system, and you're talking to them and you see these eyes that are empty and you're like, you don't know.
Yeah.
Like my director didn't know. So I went out for drinks with my director and I would tell him and he'd be like, how do you know this stuff? And I'd be like, well, I've studied like Schiller and I've studied ballet. Like, have you not? And he's like, yeah, I have. And that's the thing where then he's my boss too. So I got fired anyway, by the way, because I didn't take the vaccine. So that's how I ended up being pushed out of the industry. I wouldn't take the vaccine because it got mandated in my company.
Yeah.
And I got fired on the spot. Literally 2 weeks later, me and my fiance were out of a job and we didn't have any source of income. We went from being hired dancers to being unemployed aliens in Canada within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And
because I have a conference coming up in September. I'm a member of the BC Registered Music Teachers Association, I'm the second vice president at the moment, and I'm just trying to work out how kind of brainstorm things that I can say to people. I know I can't come straight out with a whole enchilada because
No,
people won't accept that.
no.
But this is why I'm reading literature so much, just to figure out, okay, how did people say it in previous generations?
I think satire is always great. And
Yeah.
I always, being British, especially, it's my nature, like to be sarcastic and not to be, it was hard. Yeah. So it was hard sometimes not to get too dark with it because my experience was tough. And that would put people off of me. I made that mistake. That's my fault. I couldn't manage. But yeah, laughing at it works.
Yeah.
And it does make them feel silly enough that they think. I had that with my director and I did get in. But because, I mean, the form is so set that he would have, at some point, it's like you're asking that other person also to make the same soulful choice that you're going to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now I'm so grateful that I got kicked out, you know, because it's been the best thing for me. But you just don't know how that trial will shape you. And other people aren't willing to go through that because they have a place of prestige and status. And it would take for a real leader to come and make that choice, you know, like to go through that and be trialed and then come out as the winner, because he probably will. But I saw in my director's eyes, like he understood what I was saying even. So you might get that, like you might get through. And the real sad thing is you get through and that's when it gets really scary because you're like, oh, you're not gonna change. And they're like, I can't. And you're like, you can. And they're like, no, my whole condition is based on me behaving like this.
Yeah.
And then you're like, so I'm an artist and you're what? And then
yeah. Because I had to take a step back because I'm a classical singer, and I had to take a step back from the groups that I have been involved with because they just wanted to continue wearing face masks, and I'm just not singing with a face mask on. I'm not doing that again. And I would rather sing in the forest than put a face mask on again.
Exactly.
But I'm also trying to be on this journey of finding things that I can learn to sing, and I have a coach as well, but things that I can sing that don't require a big production that would make me more free to express what I want to express.
So that's exactly what I've been thinking about, like small ballets that I could potentially put on in Montreal that still speak to the real intent, right? And I love that idea because I think like you're perfectly capable of organizing that in the forest, which is a free place, which is what God made for us. Like we can always go back there and start again. Yeah, they made all these cities and towns, and it's great, the institution, as we know. But if it really got that bad, then basically what you'd have to do is start in a barn again and just go again. You know, like without the capital that they have, without sure all the power that they have, but with the truth. And that is enough, especially for the children, because that's actually really why anybody would do anything of this cause, is because you know those future generations will find it. They will be able to still develop themselves off it, and they won't be completely lost. And I think that might not sound like enough for people, but it is for me. And some days it's not, but like, yeah, I think we start with there. Like, I think that we go back to that small place and we organize the ones that we know. And we say, like, can we do this? Can we try? Because of course, coming out of what the chaos that we've just come out of, I get it that individually people are they're doing their work, but like to get them to do something else can be tricky. Because it's just that thing of like, there's a real lack of faith and hope in the world. But the only way we get it back is by doing art and culture. Like the only way we really get it back. I mean, history and everything like is so great, right, for the past, but you got to get your future back. And the only way you get your future back is get your soul back. And the only way you get your soul back is you get your culture back. And that starts back where it starts, like in the town, in the village. But it's probably not going to happen in cities, you know, like I saw what happened with Ballet BC. And that was just so easy for them. Like they got these comptrollers that come in they reorganize everything. They do it in 6 weeks, and then that's it. But I think that class also shows like it's so easy for these beautiful traditions to be hijacked by imposters, and
they're hijacked by people who don't really know the art very well.
like really they know nothing. They are depraved. Like it's not that they kind of like secretly know and are not telling you. Like if you went to Diaghilev and was like, all right, one-on-one debate on Platonist principles and like the let's go on the meaning of life, for example, like why are you and me here? He would be like, well, I'm not really here for anything. And the other would be like, well, I'm here for all of these things. So like right there, you would have in the reason of the individual a real lack. And that's where all of the illusion, all of the smoke and mirror would come crashing down in an open public forum. And that's why Newton and a lot of these people refused to go into public forums. I mean, come on, like none of them were gonna go up against these guys and actually fight on principle. They didn't know the principles.
Yeah, that makes, and you made that point a couple of times in your presentation, which I really appreciated. That in order to engage in art, one has to be able to have some understanding of what are the principles that you're acting upon as you compose and create and perform, as Da Vinci did. So you could see the difference between like a Leonardo da Vinci, who made a very clear point to his students that you shouldn't paint, whether it's something as far as minerals, rocks, or foliage or whatever that you haven't explored deeply. And it's only when you understand the growth, the nature of the thing that you're painting that you then, or anatomy is as well. People think that he was sick for like dissecting the human body and cadavers, but it's like, no, he wanted to understand the nature of biology in order to better express it in a truthful manner, creatively. And then you have a lot of the other painters who wanted to skip the steps, not understand what they were painting, and it might get a sort of visual impressive quality, but there's none of the substance behind what they're doing. So the fact that this also expresses itself so clearly in the realm of dance makes sense. It's a very beautiful idea.
And they still, the way they do it also is like we said, they steal the form. They don't create their own dances. They take dances from the classical, like so they take the ones that are trained by the truth and then impose upon them a false reality or a false condition. So they still need that form. That's why they set up the Royal Ballet School. I mean, they still need you to be actually good, like a great opera singer like Shaliapin or any others that got broken in Russia by singing just awful music, which is happening today too. Like there's loads of people online like talking about this, that like the frequency is completely wrong and they can't sing up there. And it's hurting and they're running out of breath, and it's well basically it's destroying their voice. After like most opera singers in the past were able to sing way into their 70s. Now everybody's canceling out at like 45, 50. So what? Human anatomy just changed?
Right.
And also at the younger ages too, the Handel's Messiah was written for children to sing because women didn't sing in public. So all of those high sopranos would have been sung by children. So
I sung it.
Yeah. So these days when I teach kids singing, so I'm passionate about that. And that children can sing really well and they don't have to just sing Mary Had a Little Lamb. Like they can really sing well.
Yeah, no, they can actually sing from their chest, not from their throat. So yeah, we talk because I did, that's the thing in Royal, we had to do choir 3 times a week and we were taught the forms like really, really well. Like I was an awful painter, but like singer was good, and they really taught us those principles in singing too. I had an awesome music teacher who was a cellist called Melanie Bryce. She also saved my character because she said like, this school's a little bit messed up. You need to just, your soul's good, but your brain's a bit off. Like you need to come back to you and not renegade and revolt against everything, because there's really a lot of good things. And she was another savior, and she did it through music, and she took me in one-on-one, and I did a lot of vocal lessons, and I was a soprano until 15. My voice didn't break, so I could sing the Handel's Messiah, the aria, with another boy, and it was special. So she took me under her wing, and she was like, I was messing around, getting into trouble, and she was like, choir practice. And I was like, well, because I actually loved it, like being able to go up to those high notes. I was getting taken the mickey out of actually by all the other boys that I wasn't a tenor or a bass yet, because they were like, haha, like, you know. And I'm like, well, I got time. Like this is, once it's gone, it's gone, you know. So,
Yeah.
but it's
But
a beautiful.
it's always the people who cannot sing who ridicule your singing.
Yeah, that was often the case too. They weren't in the chamber choir, most of them, that's for sure. Yeah.
All right, guys. Unfortunately, I would love to continue this, but schedule doesn't permit. But Nick, thank you for this generosity and just sharing your experience and research and insight. And I'm really looking forward to the series of essays that I know are boiling and baking under the surface. So when those come out, we'll definitely run those immediately with your upcoming book. So I know we have a lot of vistas to explore, especially now that you've shown us all of these different performers and performances that I personally either didn't know about or forgot about. So please send me a list of different resources on top of what you've shared in the chat box. I'll make them available when this goes online. And thank you, and thank you everybody for sharing this Sunday with us.
Thank you all. It was a wonder.
Bye.
Enjoy.